Chapter 45-44. All of you, follow me. Xiao Hua turned his head to take a look. Chun Chung, Ma Miaoka, and Fox were following closely behind him. There were also some humans behind them. The other demons did not follow. Clearly, they were the first batch that sun-devouring great demon had mentioned. Yes, senior. Chun Chung and Ma Miaoka responded, and their flying speed increased slightly. However, the moment they sped up, the two whirlwinds hit the light and clouds protecting their bodies. The strength of the whirlwinds was so great that they staggered, and their flying speed decreased again. As he looked at their sorry state, Xiao Hua came to an understanding. If nothing unexpected happened, then this specter plane was still a superimposition of 2 layers of space. The so-called restriction was probably the restriction of another space. When he thought of this, Xiao Hua became anxious again. His Dharma eyes couldn't see through the fine lines of time, so he naturally couldn't see through the restrictions of the other space. Especially, the other space was obviously an ancient primitive space, so how could the restrictions within it be easy to deal with? Follow behind me. Xiao Hua thought for a moment. He waved his hand, and a layer of lightning appeared. He wanted to protect himself and the group of humans and demons, just like when they were in the strange beast enclosure. Unfortunately, the lightning mist had only rushed out a few meters when a sizzling sound came from the space. An indescribable grayish-black liquid appeared and corroded the lightning mist in a moment. Hiss! Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. He raised his hand and made a grabbing motion. Ka-cha-cha. A huge hand of lightning that was dozens of meters in size appeared and fell towards the space in front of him. As Xiao Hua expected, in just a few breaths of time, a grayish-black hand that was even bigger than the lightning hand fell. The huge hand of lightning was also obliterated. Senior, Chun Chung said in a low voice from behind. Junior heard that on the ghost plane, whether it's the human race's Taoist divine abilities, Confucian techniques, or Buddhist techniques, or the demon race's demon physique, they're all restrained. Yes. Xiao Hua nodded. He quietly raised his finger and a strand of demonic qi appeared. It pierced the space like a needle. Sizzling? A small, almost inaudible sound came. The demonic qi was also corroded.
Oh my.
Xiao Hua smacked his lips and said with a bitter smile, looks like this Xiao only has the soul technique and heavenly dragon technique left. However, these two divine abilities were not suitable to be revealed in front of these cultivators. They would have to wait for a while. Now this Xiao will first try an escape technique. Soon after, Xiao Hua seemed to be flying slowly. However, he also activated his 5 elemental escape technique, wind escape technique, lightning escape technique, etc.
to see the effect.
However, the results were not as optimistic. Aside from the water escape being slightly faster, there was no difference in the other escape techniques. Thus, Xiao Hua activated his water escape technique and flew forward. After flying for the time it took to finish a meal, Xiao Hua didn't encounter any danger, nor did he encounter any exotic beasts. Other than silence, there was only darkness. However, Xiao Hua's heart didn't relax. Instead, it gave birth to a feeling of insecurity. Just like the darkness before dawn, danger was inevitable. The more there was no movement, the more it meant that danger was right in front of him. Sure enough, just as Xiao Hua's eyes were darting around, ow! A scream sounded from behind Xiao Hua and the others. Xiao Hua was shocked and hurriedly stopped. However, before he could stabilize himself, whoosh! A gust of wind came from behind him. Even someone as strong as Xiao Hua found it difficult to stabilize himself when faced with this gust of wind. He drifted along with the gust of wind into the distance. Its speed was actually several times faster than Xiao Hua's flying speed. Spatial laws. There's actually spatial laws in this gust of wind. Xiao Hua was naturally different from Chun Chung and the others. Other than being shocked, he could naturally sense the strangeness of this gust of wind. He almost cried out in disbelief in his heart. The gust of wind in this ghost plains actually has spatial laws that can annihilate all the cultivators in the 3 continents. No wonder Su Ji's face turned pale at the mention of it. Although Xiaohua had overestimated the danger of Star Moon Palace, at this moment, he finally understood that even if he had encountered a spatial fragment of the immortal realm, even if he had escaped from the mouth of an immortal beast, he still underestimated Star Moon Palace. This Star Moon Palace was definitely not a place where cultivators from the mortal realm could enter. Even the immortals from the immortal realm did not have the confidence to escape unscathed. Moreover, Xiaohua completely understood why Star Moon Palace was unknown before Fairy Xingyu appeared and only became famous after Fairy Xingyu was banished to the 3 continents. It was purely because the cultivators and demons who had entered Star Moon Palace previously did not have the ability to leave alive. Only the 2 immortals, Fairy Xingyu and Xueqi, who had special magical powers, were lucky enough to enter and leave. Moreover, it was precisely because the cultivators and demons who entered Star Moon Palace in the future followed the 2 immortals that they had a chance to leave alive. Which ancient almighty, refined Star Moon Palace? Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Since cultivators from the mortal realm cannot enter, why did it appear in the mortal realm? Isn't this digging a trap for cultivators from the mortal realm? Just as Xiaohua was smiling bitterly, a huge light shadow flashed past in front of his eyes, which was the place where he had flown past and where the screams had come from. Sadly, in front of the light shadow, there were 3 demons and 1 human who were struggling in the fierce wind. They did not have any resistance at all when the light shadow passed by.
Ah!
Screams were immediately heard. With the help of the light shadow, Xiaohua could clearly see that the bodies of the demons and humans were instantly shattered into pieces. Moreover, the pieces disappeared in a flash. Not only were they weak, even their souls were unable to escape. This light shadow was really as terrifying as a ghost. Xiaohua had heard Xueqi's description earlier and knew how terrifying the restrictive spell was. However, when the restrictive spell was activated, Xiaohua was still shocked by its power. He had never seen such a powerful restrictive spell before. But after a flash of light and shadow, the gale rose again and mixed with the gale from before. Like a storm, Qin Cheng and the others had already been blown away to God knows where. As for Xiaohua, he was barely able to use the wind evasion technique to stabilize his body in the gale. After flying for half a cup of tea's time, the fierce wind disappeared again. Xiaohua stood in the darkness and silently looked behind him. Previously, there had been several screams. Dozens of demons and humans had been killed without any struggle. Xiaohua believed that even if he encountered them, he would not have much chance to escape. Human Mahayana realm cultivators were just ants here. Just as he was thinking, in the darkness, 3 demonic beasts and 2 humans appeared exhausted. Weren't they the fire stork, green bow, flying tiger, Qin Cheng, and Ma Miaoka who had been following behind Xiaohua? Xiaohua was overjoyed and hurriedly called out, quickly. Qin Cheng and the others were also overjoyed to hear Xiaohua's call. Just as they were about to move, a powerful restrictive spell that Xiaohua had never seen before appeared out of thin air. It was as if the entire world had descended from the heavens and trapped Xiaohua, Qin Cheng, Ma Miaoka, fire stork, green leopard, and flying tiger. Xiaohua was shocked, and his magic power surged rapidly as he tried to use the wind escape technique. Unfortunately, the magic power of a human Mahayana realm cultivator could not be mobilized at all in this restrictive spell. The starry sky nascent soul within his body was also restricted, and his 100 or so scattered nascent souls were unable to sense it at all. Immediately afterward, a huge light shadow fell, and the profound meaning of space instantly filled the surroundings. Senior. Chun Cheng opened his mouth, but he was unable to make a sound. Xiaohua could only see Qin Cheng's lips move, but Qin Cheng and Ma Miaoka's bodies had already been reduced to fragments by the laws of space. The fire stork, green leopard, and flying tiger only lasted for a few breaths of time before they also collapsed. Xiaohua's body was also flickering with golden light, and large cracks had appeared on the surface of his body as his body began to collapse. Damn it! Xiaohua was trembling with fear. How could he allow himself to be restrained? He hurriedly used the soul cultivators traveling south, north, and north technique to teleport into the distance. Even on the primitive continent, the soul cultivator's escape technique was a piece of cake, but under the restrictive spell of space, it was like wading through mud. Xiaohua tried his best to teleport, but it seemed that he had only teleported a few dozen feet. However, it was these few dozen feet that saved Xiaohua's life again. Xiaohua felt a huge light shadow flash behind him, brushing past his back as it fell. At the same time, Xiaohua also clearly sensed that where the light shadow fell, everything was reduced to nothingness. Oh no! Xiaohua was just about to breathe a sigh of relief when a sense of crisis appeared on his back. Within the space of several dozen feet around the light shadow, the powerful laws of space roared like a wave, and these laws naturally engulfed Xiaohua. The power of laws poured into Xiaohua's body without restraint. It wanted to tear apart every bit of flesh and blood in Xiaohua's body. Damn it! Seeing that the power of laws was more powerful than thousands of hands tearing his body apart, Xiaohua roared. The lightning power of the three corpses in lightning surged around his body as he forcibly resisted. At the same time, the traveling south-north technique was once again activated, and Xiaohua's body forcibly moved again, seeing that he could no longer endure and that his body was about to collapse, another gust of wind rose up. The light shadow flashed and unexpectedly disappeared from Xiaohua's side. Xiaohua's body was swept up by the gust of wind like broken cotton and rushed into the distance. An uncontrollable berserk force was born in the space around Xiaohua. Then, as if it had broken through several layers of space shackles, the spatial explosion and the conversion of the laws of space appeared around Xiaohua. When Xiaohua was dizzy and didn't know where he was, a huge starry sky miraculously appeared in the sky in the distance. No way. Xiaohua, who had almost escaped death, looked into the distance in disbelief. His body was trembling like a sieve. Happiness had come too suddenly. Although he had inexplicably arrived at the edge of the ghost plane and was only a short distance away from the resplendent sea of stars, Xiaohua still didn't dare to relax. He carefully looked around and sped up. Chapter 45. As expected by Xiaohua, although he only used the time it took to finish a meal, behind him, on the ghost plains, there were several flashes of light and shadow. The screams could no longer be heard. Xiaohua also didn't know how many of the hundreds and thousands of monster clan and human clan would be able to make it through the ghost plains alive. Left and right, under several gusts of wind, he finally saw a huge platform. It wasn't until his body landed on the platform powerlessly that he was able to release his divine sense again. His mind could also sense the space around him. Only then did his heart completely relax. This Xiao has finally passed through the ghost plains. Damn it, this ghost plains is really the ghost plains. Xiaohua muttered to himself as he sat down on the platform, which was a rare sight. He looked at the grayish-white plains. Right at this moment, another light and shadow appeared in the distance. Xiaohua didn't even think about it and opened his delusion breaker eyes. He really wanted to see what exactly those restrictions that seemed to be everywhere were. Unfortunately, Xiaohua was ultimately disappointed. He saw that the ghost plains was the same as before, still covered in layers of fine lines. The so-called light and shadow was extremely far away from him, so how could he see it clearly? The light and shadow disappeared, and he also didn't see any restrictions. Forget it! Xiaohua was helpless. Just as he was about to close his delusion breaker eyes, suddenly, the entire platform shook greatly. Xiaohua very naturally looked towards the source of the tremors. Wherever his delusion breaker eyes passed, Xiaohua's heart was even more shocked than the platform. Because through the fine lines, he saw a huge pillar of golden light stop on the platform in the distance, then immediately disappeared. Xiaohua opened his mouth wide and cried out in disbelief. Could it be that the restrictions on the ghost plains are mobile? And they're not simply placed on the plains? However, in the next instant, another inconceivable thought appeared in his mind, or, On this ghost plains, there are ancient divine beasts that are even more powerful than the strange beasts in the strange beast pens. They were in another space and could move freely within Star Moon Palace. Could they easily kill everything in this space? Of course, there was another possibility. The golden pillar I saw just now was the body of a divine beast. This divine beast was too huge. It didn't know that there were humans and demons from the 3 continents in this space. It was just that when it was moving, it bumped into the humans and demons in this space. Because its law of space could pass through the layers of time, it had accidentally bumped into these demons who had the strength of a sun devourer? Damn it, this is impossible. In the end, Xueqi was too embarrassed to think too much about it, because what he thought was truly unimaginable. Even he didn't dare to believe it. Then, Xueqi opened his transcendence vision and looked behind the platform where the golden pillar had disappeared. Behind the platform, there was naturally a blank space. Only the abnormally dense time-fine lines could be seen, and nothing else could be seen. After closing his delirium eyes, Xueqi powerlessly sat back down on the platform. He stared blankly at the distant sky that shone through the darkness. What's after this platform? I wonder if that's a pillar-shaped restriction, or where the pillar-shaped divine beast went. Is that the end of the divine restriction? Perhaps the real Star Moon Palace is behind this platform? Xueqi's strange thoughts popped up one after another. His curiosity was like a wild grass that was popping up randomly. However, Xueqi was also clear in his heart that he definitely couldn't go beyond the platform. If there was such a powerful restriction or divine beast before the platform, then what about after the platform? He really didn't dare to believe that he would still have a chance to survive after going deep into the platform. After resting for a short while, there were no more flickers of light on the ghost plains. After that, more greater demons from the demonic beast race arrived one after another. These greater demons were clearly frightened by the light, and when they saw Xueqi, they were still in a state of shock. After the great demons bowed slightly, they also scattered and went to different places. After the great demons, there were also some humans who flew over. These humans were all pale and scared out of their wits. The human cultivators were naturally different from the great demons. When they saw Xueqi, they were very respectful. They all stood on the platform and quietly listened to Xueqi's instructions. Xueqi stood up, looked around, and asked, "Are there any more human cultivators behind?" "We don't know." A tall general dressed in battle armor said, "We were arranged to be in the second group." When the restriction was triggered, the entire plain was filled with hurricanes. We and the surrounding humans were all blown away. "Yes, we also didn't know why we came here," another master dressed in Confucian robes echoed. Xueqi lowered his head and looked at his right hand. The arrow and light that disappeared in the ghost plains appeared again, and the distance between the arrow and the light was very close. The direction the arrow pointed to was the same as the platform Xueqi was on, and it was the opposite of where the light and shadow shook. Xueqi thought for a while and asked, "Where are you going now?" "I'll let you know," the general said respectfully. According to the seniors who entered the Star Moon Palace earlier, this place is the deepest part of the Star Moon Palace. Behind this platform is the abyss of the void. We can't go any further. In the past, there were great demons who didn't believe it and went in to investigate. However, no one who went in has ever returned alive. Instead, to the left of this platform is the resplendent sea of stars. It's where our opportunity lies. We can find any starry sky to comprehend. We're going to take a look at the starry sky over there. At this point, the general pointed to the place where the light and shadow shook, and a trace of hope appeared on his pale face. Seeing the general's expression, and then looking at the other cultivators, they all had the same expression. Even the great Yao who had left after bowing earlier also harbored the same longing as them. Xueqi couldn't help but sigh. He recalled Zhu Qing's words at the star-plucking tower in the Copper Pillar Nation. Everyone's opportunities are different. There are Confucian cultivators who comprehend the heavenly heart and become literary stars. There are also demon kings who comprehend the heavenly heart and become great saints. Of course, There are also Taoist seniors who break through the void and ascend.
Yes.
Fellow immortal Shao, believe it or not. According to the records of my Star Moon Palace, among the few who entered the Star Moon Palace, there were indeed many who obtained the opportunity to ascend to the heavens and became the most powerful figures in the 3 continents. Presumably, the different opportunities Xueqi spoke of were the opportunities in the starry sky near this platform. It was no wonder that these humans and demons gave up on the opportunities in the fallen Star Palace and risked their lives to cross the Ghost Plains. Their purpose was to comprehend the starry sky that could allow them to reach the heavens in a single step. Looking at the many cultivators of the human race who had high aspirations, what could Xueqi say? It was not good to have excessive ambition, but ambition was also the motivation for cultivation and the support for advancement. Xueqi could not blame them for anything other than encouraging them. Therefore, Xueqi raised his finger and pointed to the place the general was going and reminded him, according to what I know, there are more restrictions there. Just now, I even saw a flash of light. If you want to go there, you have to be careful. Yes, thank you for the reminder, Senior. The general nodded and asked again. Then where does Senior want to go? Haha, I want to go there. Xueqi pointed to another place and smiled. That is where the Star-Picking Tower's disciples are going. I have an appointment with the master of the Star Moon Palace. That's great. A few Confucian cultivators smiled. Then we will follow behind Senior. I believe the master of the Star-Picking Tower will not mind. Instead, the general and some Confucian cultivators hesitated and bowed. We will not follow Senior. You can go by yourselves. Be careful. Xueqi nodded and said, actually, the Star Moon Palace is full of danger. It is better to believe in yourself than to believe in others. It is better to rely on yourself than to rely on others. Previously, on the Ghost Plains, this old man was also powerless. Seeing Xueqi speak so sincerely, the human cultivators were all moved. After all, they were disciples of various aristocratic families, and there was no lack of opportunities to get close to the literary sage, or even the literary star. In their eyes, the supreme cultivators of the human race were all abnormally dignified. Not to mention a word, even a glance would not fall on them. How could they meet such an amiable and approachable person? Everyone looked at each other, and no one dared to say anything. Because they came from different aristocratic families, they did not dare to trust each other too much. However, in their hearts, they all had a plan. Everyone bowed and saluted, and then those who should leave hurriedly left, while those who stayed behind stood respectfully at the side. The respect at this time was naturally different from before. It was from the heart and superfluous on the surface. After waiting for a while, Xueqi recalled that Chen Cheng and the others had already said that it was impossible to pass through the Ghost Plains by relying on the magical powers of the human race and the demon race alone. It was only possible with the help of the hurricanes produced by triggering the restrictions. Now, there was no light shadow, which meant that the restrictions had not been triggered. Naturally, there would not be any human race and the demon race coming. So Xueqi stood up and said, "Let's go." "Yes, Senior." Everyone answered, and followed behind Xueqi. There were restrictions on the platform that Xueqi could not sense. Previously, when he came over from the Ghost Plains, he saw a huge starry sky, but when he landed on the platform, the starry sky disappeared again. After Xueqi flew for a while, many light shadows appeared in front of him. These light shadows appeared and disappeared, and were somewhat vague. However, when Xueqi's gaze fell on the light shadows, it felt as if his gaze was drawn into them. When Xueqi flew for another 1,000 feet, a huge starry sky actually covered the top of his head without any obstruction. Is this the resplendent sea of stars? Xueqi's figure stopped for a moment, and he lowered his head to look at his right hand. The arrow on his right hand was still pointing forward, and it did not stop. Xueqi was just about to move when a Confucian cultivator behind him said respectfully, "Senior, this junior intends to comprehend the mystery of the starry sky here." "Good. I hope your wish will come true." Xueqi nodded. After that Confucian cultivator saluted, he rushed into the starry sky and disappeared in a moment. Chapter 45-46. Then, Xueqi continued to fly forward. Although he felt that he had flown very far, the starry sky above his head seemed to have never changed. If Xueqi didn't know that he had been flying all this time, he would have suspected that he had been imprisoned in a certain place. Just as Xueqi was about to search for Xueqi and the others, something flashed in front of his eyes. It was as if there were some halos flashing by. Xueqi's heart skipped a beat. He stopped and looked up, only to see that the starry sky was different from before. Not only was it different, the strange scene in front of his eyes made Xueqi stupefied again. In front of Xueqi's eyes, different pieces of starry sky had miraculously appeared on the horizon. The starry sky that Xueqi had passed by earlier had already disappeared and turned into a small piece of starry sky, hanging at the edge of this different starry sky. Adjacent to this piece of starry sky was a faint, fuzzy halo. This halo seemed to be the boundary of a starry sky, separating the different pieces of starry sky. Although the starry sky in each piece of starry sky was bright, the brilliance that flashed was different, and the rhythm of the flashing was also different. In particular, one didn't need to distinguish them. As long as one's gaze swept across these pieces of starry sky, a feeling would emerge from the bottom of one's heart, letting one know that each piece of starry sky was different. Damn it! Xueqi looked at this amazing, resplendent, and vast starry sky and finally understood the origin of the resplendency of stars. He couldn't help but sigh and say, "This is the real work of an ancient almighty expert." Presumably, each starry sky is the starry sky of a certain realm. So many starry skies. I wonder how many realm starry skies are there. It should be Fengwu, who came here. The starry sky he attracted in the Great Sage Hall was only the starry sky of the 3 continents. Now that he is here, he can see the starry sky of various realms. If he can attract the starry sky of these realms, then what kind of miracle would that be? While sighing, Xueqi's right hand began to shake. The arrowhead and the light had already merged. After the brilliance dissipated, the astrolabe appeared in Xueqi's hand again. Without waiting for Xueqi to raise his hand, the astrolabe transformed into a shooting star and flew towards one of the countless stars in the starry sky. Immediately after, a boundless consciousness swept over. Xueqi's calm voice transmitted over, "Xueqi, you're here?" A strange expression appeared on Xueqi's face. He nodded and replied, "Yes, Senior. Junior has finally arrived at the resplendent sea of stars. And come over and we'll talk." Xueqi sensed the strangeness in Xueqi's tone and didn't explain. Xueqi looked at the human cultivators on the left and said, "Everyone, this old man is going to look for Master Xingyu. You all can go and comprehend by yourselves. It seems that there is no danger here. As long as you control your cultivation speed, don't be too greedy and don't go too deep into the starry sky, you'll be able to reap some benefits." Yes, I understand. Numerous cultivators were eager to give it a try when they saw the true faces of the numerous starry skies. At this moment, they listened to Xueqi's instructions and saluted respectfully before each of them found a different starry sky and soared into the sky. Xueqi wasn't in a hurry to find Xueqi. Instead, he released his divine sense to investigate. However, when his divine sense approached these pieces of space, he discovered something strange. Although each piece of the starry sky didn't look very big, the place where one's spiritual force landed was actually no different from a real starry sky. Spiritual force had a tendency to sink into it very easily. Xueqi's spiritual force didn't dare to get too close. Since he couldn't get too close, he couldn't carefully explore every piece of the starry sky. Xueqi's plan to find the 3 continents, the ruins, or the Great Desolation Continent's starry sky from these thousands of starry skies was shattered again. Moreover, every time Xueqi's spiritual force swept past a dozen pieces of starry sky, 1 or 2 pieces of starry sky would appear that he couldn't get close to them. It was as if there was a layer of restriction sealing the starry sky. Since his exploration was fruitless, Xueqi gave up and urged his figure to fly towards the place where Xueqi's spiritual force swept past. At this moment, the starry sky was different from the previous one. The starry sky above the horizon was like a curtain of stars. It wasn't as vast as the previous starry sky. In just half a meal's time, Xueqi had flown over 1,000 pieces of starry sky and already saw Xueqi and the others stopped in midair. At this moment, Xueqi's body was completely enveloped in a faint silver brilliance. Outside the brilliance, there was something like a chain that tightly bound him from top to bottom. Even so, some immortal's coercion that ordinary cultivators couldn't resist still seeped out of the chain and surged in all directions like waves. Next to Xueqi was Fairy Xingyu. Her body was also suffused with mottled silver light, similar to Xueqi's. Their faces were covered by the silver light, so no one could see them clearly. In front of the two immortals, in a place extremely far away, thousands of human clan cultivators were arranged in a strange formation. They were facing a dozen pieces of starry sky and were waiting for battle. "You're finally here." Fairy Xingyu turned her head to look at Xueqi, her tone unusually cold. "I thought you wouldn't come again." Xueqi was already a little angry. Seeing Fairy Xingyu like this, his tone also turned cold. "It's not that I didn't want to come. It's because I encountered too many dangers in Star Moon Palace that I didn't know about. I'm even inferior to those Confucian great grandmasters and the great demons of the demon clan. The exotic beast pen, the Fubo mountain range, the lost star palace, the ghost plain, oh, and this resplendent star sea. I've never heard of such wonderful names. If I hadn't been lucky, I wouldn't have been killed by the exotic beasts in the exotic beast pen or killed by the restriction of the ghost plain. How could I have lingered at death's door and arrived here?
I've made it clear to you.
As long as you pass through the transmission channel, immediately activate the star disk. We will wait for you outside the exotic beast pen and bring you here." Fairy Xingyu said faintly. "These so-called dangers are not dangers at all. But you didn't activate the star disk at all. How could we find you? It was you who wanted to take risks in these places. What does it have to do with us? You brought this upon yourself. Are you going to blame us for it? Is this the senseless risk you mentioned?" Xueqi smiled coldly and pointed to the thousands of disciples who were on guard in the distance. "I remember that when we came in from outside the Star Moon Palace, there were tens of thousands of disciples. How many are left now?" "That's none of your business," Fairy Xingyu replied. "Before they came in, I already told them that I can't guarantee their safety. But I can guarantee that if they survive, not only will they be rewarded by Star-Picking Tower, but they will also be able to improve their cultivation." Xueqi.
Xueqi spoke.
"You don't have to blame Xingyu. This was a matter of mutual consent. If they weren't willing, Xingyu would never force them. As for you, alas, it's my fault. Xingyu wanted to tell you about the dangers in the Star Moon Palace in detail, but I was afraid that you wouldn't come. So, I hid it from you. In fact, on the other hand, I never thought that the dangers you mentioned earlier would pose any threat to a Mahayana realm human. The most dangerous one is the ghost plane. I also think that it can't be compared to the heaven prison at all. You were lucky enough to come out of the heaven prison. The ghost plane is just a piece of cake." At this point, Xueqi raised his eyes to look at the dozen or so stars on the left. Although he couldn't see the expression on his face, Xueqi could still feel the deep regret in Xueqi's tone. "Since you feel that everything we have done is unfair to you, you can give up. We won't force you." "Xueqi." Fairy Xingyu was shocked. "Are you crazy? At this point, how can you say this? In your current situation, how can you wait until the next opening of the Star Moon Palace? Xingyu, do you still remember the agreement you and I made when you formed the Star Moon Palace?" Xueqi didn't answer Fairy Xingyu's question. Fairy Xingyu was stunned and replied without hesitation, "Of course I know. Isn't that your three uncertainties? First, you're not allowed to interfere with the cultivation of the three continents. Second, you're not allowed to get involved in the disputes of the three continents. Third, you're not allowed to use your magical powers to bully the weak." At this point, Fairy Xingyu understood. She glared fiercely at Xueqi and didn't say anything else. Xueqi said faintly to Xueqi, "Xueqi, did you hear that?" Do you think it would be difficult for us to attack the Immortal Palace directly with our magical powers, kill Immortal Emperor Go Chen, and then support the Primordial Chaos Ancestor to become the leader of the Dao sect? Ahem. Xiaohua touched his nose and looked up at the dozens of stars in front of him. He answered without answering the question. By the way, which of these dozens of stars has the passage? In fact, Xiaohua had already had some ideas outside the Star Moon Palace. However, he also knew that even though Fairy Xingyu and Xueqi were both immortals, and Xueqi was an upright and plain-spoken immortal world's law enforcer, they were still humans after all. It was inevitable that they would have their own plans. They didn't talk about the situation in the Star Moon Palace in detail, and Xiaohua didn't care. In particular, both humans and demons on the 3 continents knew that the Star Moon Palace was useful for humans and demons at the 7th level of essence power. Xiaohua hadn't expected the Star Moon Palace to be so dangerous that even an immortal like Xueqi would be injured. That was why he was enraged when his life was threatened again and again. After Xueqi's explanation, Xiaohua, who had always been easygoing, put himself in Xueqi's and Fairy Xingyu's shoes and understood their difficulties. His resentment had long disappeared. Humph. Fairy Xingyu snorted coldly. Didn't you want to leave? No one wants you to stay. Hee. Xiaohua laughed. I want to leave, but I can't bear to part with those cultivation techniques, immortaling slips and the like. Little money grubber. Fairy Xingyu also scolded with a smile. Xueqi didn't say much. He pointed at the dozens of stars and said, many of the stars in the resplendent sea of stars will change their positions and constellations every time the Star Moon Palace appears. The first time we found a star with the aura of the immortal world, it was near here. However, every time we came in, it was not in its original position. Of course, the distance it moved each time was not too far. Therefore, if nothing unexpected happens, that star should be among these dozens of stars. As for which star it is, we'll know when the aura of the immortal world appears in a while. Chapter 45-48. At this point, Xueqi seemed to have thought of something. He looked at Xiaohua and said, by the way, speaking of the 3 forbids, Xiaohua, if you have time in the future, go to the Bronze Pillar Nation. No, it's not the Bronze Pillar Nation anymore. It's the Jade Rock Nation, right? Go to the 7 Suns Temple there, and take a look at your Dao sect blood steel. 7 Suns Temple? Xiaohua was stunned and asked, what's wrong with the Dao sect blood steel? You'll know when you see it. Xueqi didn't want to say more. He only replied, I've already said the 3 forbids. What else do you need me to say?
All right.
Xiaohua was speechless. He then looked around and asked, Senior, you've been waiting for a long time, right? After all, he had spent a lot of time in other places. Yes. Xueqi nodded. I've waited longer than before. Xiaohua hesitated and said, you didn't miss it because you were delayed when you came in, right? Fairy Xingyu spat. Don't jinx it. Can't you say something nice? Haha. Xiaohua looked around and asked again, what's beyond this starry sky? What is it? Senior, have you seen it? If it were you, would you dare to go? Fairy Xingyu asked. Of course I wouldn't. Xiaohua answered with a smile. But Senior, you're an immortal. No matter what, you're braver than me. Our strength is limited because of our physical bodies, so we don't dare to go too deep into the Star Moon Palace. Xueqi replied, the places you've been to are the places we've been to on our 3rd and 4th trips. From the 5th time onwards, we've basically followed the original route and directly looked for this starry sky. As for what's beyond the starry sky and the platform, we don't know. Of course, as far as I know, many demons have gone to the platform, but none of them have ever returned. Oh, the killing thunder is on the other side of the starry sky. It seems to lead to the platform. With your cultivation, you should be able to get a little closer. If you're lucky and don't encounter the thunder, you should be able to see the secret behind the platform. Curiosity killed the cat. Fairy Xingyu reminded him, you're already a Mahayana realm cultivator. As long as you cultivate steadily, you'll be able to ascend to the celestial realm sooner or later. I suggest that you don't explore it. Boom. At this moment, the entire starry sky seemed to tremble. A powerful aura of the immortal realm emerged from somewhere in the starry sky like a gale and crashed down. Not to mention the thousands of cultivators in the sky who were on guard. Even Xiao Hua's body trembled and his knees almost buckled. On the other hand, the silver light around Xueqi and Fairy Xingyue suddenly flourished, and their figures also expanded by several feet. Fortunately, the aura of the celestial realm was like a gust of wind. After it blew, the power of the stars and moons appeared in the starry sky, forcefully washing away the aura. The deterrent force gradually disappeared. However, even so, the thousands of cultivators were still paralyzed in the air, unable to move for a long time. That starry sky. As soon as the aura of the celestial realm disappeared, Xueqi raised his hand and pointed to the farthest starry sky. As he spoke, his figure flashed and he rushed to the starry sky. Fairy Xingyu was not in a hurry. She flew to the front of the cultivators and waved her hand. Thousands of starlight rays appeared from her hand and fell between the cultivators' eyebrows. In a moment, these cultivators all stood up in the air. Disciples, it's that starry sky. Fairy Xingyu raised her voice and said, "You can enter the starry sky with your own perception of the starry sky. If you can find the door to the starry sky, you will naturally appear from the starry sky. Even if you can't find the door to the starry sky, you don't have to worry. When the Star-Moon Palace closes, you'll still be pushed out of the starry sky by the Star-Moon Palace. Moreover, whether you can find the door to the starry sky or not, the comprehension in this starry sky will definitely be of great help to your cultivation." "Yes, we understand," the cultivators answered excitedly, because what Fairy Xingyu said was true. The cultivators who had entered this starry sky to search for the door, whether they succeeded or not, had gained a lot in their cultivation. "Okay, disciples, follow me in." Fairy Xingyu did not dare to delay too much. After she finished speaking, her figure turned into a silver-white starlight and rushed into the starry sky, disappearing in a moment. The thousands of disciples also flew over from various places and entered the starry sky. Xiao Hua flew to Xueqi's side. Under the pressure of the silver light, Xiao Hua could not get too close. He looked at Xueqi's figure, which was several times taller than him, and said in a low voice, "Senior, let's go in too." Xiao Hua. Xueqi did not move. Instead, he said in a low voice, "Do you understand what I said earlier? I hope you don't hate me." "Of course not," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "This is my temper. When I have some grievances, I want to say them out loud. In fact, if I say them out loud, I will forget about them." "That's for the best." Xueqi nodded. "In the future, you will understand." Xiao Hua was a little surprised. However, before he could ask again, Xueqi's figure flashed and disappeared. Xiao Hua was stunned again. He suddenly came to a realization. Didn't the Star-Moon Palace have timelines? Wouldn't Xueqi's teleportation break through the law of time? Xiao Hua wanted to open his Dharma eye to take a look, but he had used his Dharma eye too much today. Xiao Hua did not know if there would be a starry sky maze in a while, so he gave up on the idea and used his escape technique to rush into the starry sky. The feeling was similar to the last time he flew into the starry sky. When he first started to fly, the starry sky was far away. However, he did not know when, but the brilliant starry sky had quietly covered the sky above Xiao Hua's head completely. In this strange starry sky, every star was so bright. Each star exuded an inexplicably powerful power of the stars and the moon. Moreover, there was a huge star halo at the edge of each starry sky. It was like a starburst fluctuation overflowing the entire starry sky. Along with this fluctuation, the star halo swayed slightly like a silk handkerchief. Strands of immortal qi, which Xiao Hua was already familiar with, came crashing down from this fluctuation. Although there was not much immortal qi, it was enough to make thousands of cultivators bow down. These cultivators activated their divine abilities one by one. As they tried their best to resist, they formed a certain Dharma array. Fairy Xingyu was standing on this Dharma array. When she saw Xueqi and Xiaohua enter the starry sky, she raised her hand and took out her star shuttle again. Puff! A mouthful of immortal qi fell, and the entire star shuttle exploded again, turning into thousands of star fragments that fell on the Dharma array. Please, everyone. Fairy Xingyu took a deep breath and said. Hearing Fairy Xingyu being so polite, the cultivators of the human clan said in unison, "We understand. We will definitely do our best to serve Senior." Go. Fairy Xingyu issued an order. Thousands of star fragments soared into the sky and landed in various parts of the starry sky. The thousands of disciples also flew into the starry sky, following the star fragments into the starry sky and disappearing once again. After the cultivators left, Fairy Xingyu flew in front of Xueqi. She glanced at him but did not say anything. Just like Xueqi, she looked up at the bright starry sky and the star fragments that were still shining brightly in the starry sky. After a long while, the star fragments disappeared. Not a single cultivator appeared in the starry sky. Xiaohua knew that the two of them were a little nervous. He asked in a low voice, "Senior, is this the starry sky of the immortal world?" "If I'm not mistaken, it should be a part of the starry sky of the immortal world." Xueqi replied, "The immortal world is almost boundless, and the starry sky is huge. I'm not sure where this starry sky is. Do you know, Xingyu?" "Of course I know," Fairy Xingyu replied, "but don't worry, I won't tell you. It's up to you." Xiaohua said with a smile, "When I go to the immortal world in the future, I'll find it myself." After a while, there were still no star fragments. Xueqi, Fairy Xingyu, and Xiaohua were a little anxious, let alone time. Xiaohua thought for a moment and asked again, "Senior, when I passed by some starry skies earlier, many of them could not be entered by divine thought. Is there a passage to the immortal world?" "The starry skies that cannot be entered by divine thought require special means. What the naked eye can see is just an illusion array," Xueqi replied. "As for whether there is a passage to the immortal world, I don't know. However, Xingyu and I have checked many starry skies that can be entered by divine thought. There is no passage that we are looking for." "Oh, I remember now." Xiaohua thought of something again. He waved his hand and took out the Kunlun mirror. As the light vibrated, he took out the black box he had obtained from the Heaven Prison and the black box he had just obtained from the Lost Star Palace. He asked, "Senior, I just obtained 2 things in the Lost Star Palace. Can you help me take a look at them?" "Why are you so nosy?" Fairy Xingyu was a little impatient.
"Oh,
"Let me take a look." Xueqi was not surprised. He raised his hand, and the 2 boxes fell into his hands. Swish, swish, swish. As soon as the 2 boxes fell into Xueqi's silver hands, layers of thumb-sized inscriptions appeared. These inscriptions rushed toward the silver light crazily, and a sound like a surging sand tide was heard. Celestial Imperial Equipment. Fairy Xingyu was stunned and asked curiously, "There is a Celestial Imperial Equipment of Confucian cultivators in the Lost Star Palace? How come I haven't seen it even though I've been there several times?" Xiaohua shrugged and curled his lips, saying, "I'm lucky. There's nothing I can do about it." He. Fairy Xingyu snorted and said, "It's not until today that I know what it means to be shameless." "I'll try," Xueqi said as he scanned the box with his mind. "However, I'm not sure if I can break this thing." "It doesn't matter," Xiaohua said with a smile. "It's just something I picked up. Senior, please feel free to try." Xueqi raised his hand and threw the 2 boxes out.
Then he raised both hands at the same time.
Kacha, kacha. Amidst the sound of thunder, Xueqi's 2 arms turned into 2 silver thunderbolts. Woo, woo. At the same time, a hurricane appeared in the whole space. The scattered celestial qi fell into the thunderbolts. Xueqi, Fairy Xingyu was shocked. How can you activate the celestial qi? Do you want to die?" Xueqi did not answer Fairy Xingyu. Instead, he moved his body and the silver light around him began to flow rapidly. Kacha, kacha. The chains that bound the silver light made a rough sound. Boom. The two silver lights rushed out of the chains and fell into the thunderbolts. At the same time, the thunderbolts condensed thousands of feet of lightning in the nearby space. Chapter 45-49. Kacha. As Xueqi waved his hands, two thunderbolts fell on the box. The inscriptions that had calmed down and turned into nothingness surged out again. However, as soon as the inscriptions appeared, they were immediately split in half by the thunderbolts. Woo-woo. Bursts of space roared around the box. Circles of whirlpools gushed out from the void and rushed into the box. The inscriptions on the armor fell from the box like dead tadpoles. Then, the fist-sized box made a rumbling sound and began to expand. In a moment, it turned into a coffin that was more than 100 feet in size. As for the box Xueqi had left behind in the fallen star palace, after cutting off a layer of restrictions, it had turned into a black ruler that was 1 foot long and 2 fingers wide. Xueqi was a little stunned. He thought that the box from the heaven prison would contain something extremely magical, but he really did not expect it to be a coffin. The coffin was pitch black, and it was unknown what material it was made of. The 8 edges of the coffin were engraved with 8 lifelike dragons that sealed the entire coffin tightly. Looking at the front and back of the coffin, there was a ferocious-looking dragon head and a ferocious-looking dragon tail. 9 dragons' coffin? Seeing the dragon scales made of inexplicable inscriptions and the tadpole-shaped clouds between the 9 dragons, even Xueqi and Fairy Xingyu could not help but exclaim, how could the 9 dragons' coffin appear in the 3 continents? Xueqi felt guilty and hurriedly asked, Senior, 9 dragons' coffin, what is this? 9 dragons' coffin, it's an item of the heavenly court. After thinking for a moment, Fairy Xingyu replied, it's usually used to hold corpses. Of course, most of the time, it's also a secret item to hold the heavenly court's Book of Mortals. As for what's inside, it's not something we can know. Seniors, you can't open it? Xueqi was a little disappointed. Yes. Xueqi nodded and said, the 9 dragons' coffin suppression can only be opened by Earth Immortals of the heavenly court. Moreover, one must have the special skills of the heavenly court's Book of Mortals. I'm afraid we can't open it. Immortal Emperor Go Qin can't open it? Xueqi asked. Of course. In this realm, the highest level of cultivation is at the 9th grade of essence energy. How can it be opened? Fairy Xingyu nodded. After a while, she smiled again and said, by the way, if you are lucky enough to find that Book Immortal, there may be a way. Xueqi waved his hand and said with a face full of disdain, why would I make myself unhappy for no reason? Then, Xueqi pointed at the black ruler and asked, what about this? Fairy Xingyu waved her hand and took the black ruler. After examining it for a while, she handed it to Xueqi and said, this thing is a little strange. I can't tell what it is. What about you? Xueqi raised his hand and received the black ruler. After looking at it for a moment, he similarly shook his head and passed the black ruler to Xueqi, saying, I also can't discern the origin of this item. If he was not wrong, it should be an ancient divine item. You're fated to obtain it, so take care of yourself.
All right.
Xueqi helplessly put the black ruler and the 9 dragons' coffin suppression into his space and said with a wry smile, it seems that I can only wait until I have the chance. The things in the Star Moon Palace are all extraordinary. Since you're fated to obtain them, you should cherish them. Don't underestimate them. Xueqi exhorted again. Yes, I understand. Xueqi hurriedly agreed. However, the treasures in his space were too precious. How could he take care of them one by one? Fairy Xingyu looked at the still starry sky and said in a low voice, Xueqi, until now, no cultivator has revealed their star shatterer. I'm afraid we won't be able to find anything today.
Not necessarily,
Xueqi replied. His tone was naturally filled with disappointment. Senior? Xueqi's heart skipped a beat, and he said, you said before that if this starry sky is sealed by divine sense, then what the naked eye sees is an illusion array. If this starry sky is not sealed by divine sense, then what the naked eye sees is real, right? You also said that you need cultivators who are very sensitive to the power of the stars and the moon to find the passage to the immortal realm in this starry sky. Could it be that this starry sky is also an illusion array? This starry sky is a starry sky maze. Xueqi replied, the passage to the immortal realm is inside the maze. Alas, yes. Fairy Xingyu also sighed and said, the whole starry sky is a big array. Every time we come here, it changes. We have broken through it several times. Only the first time we were lucky enough to see the door of the passage. The other times, we didn't even see the door. As for the first time, Xueqi continued, we were not prepared enough and Xingyue couldn't cooperate with me, so we couldn't open the doors. A huge starry sky maze? Xiaohua squinted and looked at the stars in the sky.
He was eager to try.
Xiaohua was born with a sense of direction in the void and had broken through many void mazes. However, this was the first time he had seen such a huge starry sky maze. Seeing such a mysterious star array, he couldn't help but say in a low voice, Seniors, if you trust me, please follow me. Oh, right. Fairy Xingyu suddenly realized. Xiaohua, you are also a cultivator who passed the selection of Xingyue. Now that your strength has skyrocketed, I have forgotten about this. You take the lead. Xueqi replied, Xingyue, and I will follow behind. You don't have to feel burdened. Even if we don't succeed this time, there will be a next time. Xueqi's words were clearly meant to comfort him. Xiaohua understood that Xueqi's divination skills had already predicted that this would be the last time the Star Moon Palace would be opened. With Xueqi's injuries, he would not be able to find a suitable body for the time being. How would he be able to last until the next opening of the Star Moon Palace? Therefore, Xiaohua urged his body to fly toward the starry sky without saying a word. As the starry sky approached, Xiaohua's gaze fell on it. Boom! There was a huge tremor and a roar in Xiaohua's mind. The whole starry sky was huge. Now, with the roar, it expanded again. It was almost vast. Xiaohua could barely see the whole starry sky with his naked eye. No wonder Fairy Xingyu wanted to find thousands of cultivators. Xiaohua thought to himself, an ordinary cultivator can't search the whole starry sky. They can only find thousands of cultivators, and each of them can take a piece. But if each of them takes a piece, won't these cultivators become a huge mountain that can't see? How can they find the passage to the star array? I guess Fairy Xingyu had no choice but to come up with this plan. Xiaohua looked at the starry sky, without blinking. His eyes were also full of stars. These stars rotated and changed with his eyes. After a while, Xiaohua's eyes lit up. He waved his hand and said, Senior, please come with me. Fairy Xingyu could hardly believe her ears when she heard Xiaohua's confidence. She hurriedly moved and landed behind Xiaohua. Xueqi followed beside her at a moderate pace. In the starry sky and the void, Xiaohua's confidence was self-evident. In Xiaohua's eyes, such a vast starry sky maze was like a dharma array with ease. He flew leisurely in the starry sky without any hesitation or thought. Although they had flown for an hour, and the entire starry sky still looked like a starry sky, Xueqi and Fairy Xingyu were ecstatic. This was because the immortal spirit qi was getting denser and denser. In the end, when Xiaohua rushed toward a star and was about to stop, Fairy Xingyu said ecstatically, That's right. It's here. I came here with Xueqi for the first time. We just have to turn right. Wait. Before Fairy Xingyu could finish speaking, Xiaohua hurriedly stopped her. Senior, you have to fly backward now. Why do we have to fly backward? Fairy Xingyu was really puzzled. Yes, Xiaohua said resolutely. We have to fly backward. Don't ask me how I know. Senior, just follow me. As he spoke, he flew forward a few feet, stopped, and flew backward without looking back. After flying for a few feet, before he could get close to Xueqi, he saw the space around him distort strangely. Xiaohua's figure fell into this distorted space. Good. Even someone as calm as Xueqi could not help but clap his hands. Fairy Xingyu was also dumbfounded. She shook her head helplessly and could only praise, "Amazing, amazing." Then, the two of them flew to where Xiaohua was and flew backward again. When the distorted space shook, the starry sky was still the same starry sky. However, in front of the three of them, there was a huge yin-yang fish pattern slowly rotating in the starry sky. As it rotated, waves of immortal qi seeped out from the galaxy that condensed into the pattern. Fairy Xingyu's expression changed slightly when she scanned it. She said anxiously, "Quick, Xueqi, we don't have much time left. The immortal qi has begun to weaken. I'm afraid the passage inside is about to close." Okay. Xueqi did not dare to be negligent. He flew toward the yin-yang fish and said to Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, I still need to borrow the power of your thunder cultivation." "No problem." Xiaohua was overjoyed when he saw the yin-yang fish. He nodded and said, "Senior, please instruct me. I will do my best." Xueqi and Xiaohua flew to the star array of the yin-yang fish. Xueqi pointed at the rotating yin-yang fish and said, "I will be in charge of the yang side, and you'll be in charge of the yin side. First, we have to stop the rotation of the yin-yang fish and then activate the power of thunder to reverse it. The moment it is reversed, the starry sky gate will open and the passage to the immortal world will be inside." Although Xiaohua had some doubts, he did not have time to ask Xueqi how he knew. "Senior, please." Xiaohua raised his hand and gestured. Xueqi's figure landed above the yin-yang fish, and his body slowly rotated with the yin-yang fish. Xiaohua followed closely behind and stood opposite Xueqi. Under their feet was the black and white star. The star looked very strange. It was obviously a star, but when one looked at it, it seemed to be another starry sky. One could not see the end of it. "Rise." Xueqi raised his hands and two thunderbolts condensed into a water-blue ball suspended above the yin-yang fish. Chapter 45-50. Quick. Xiaohua also hugged his hands in the air like a Tai Chi pushing hands. A huge 9 heavens divine thunder condensed and hung above the yin fish. "Break." Xueqi glanced at Xiaohua and roared. The thunder in his hand turned into a sharp sword and pierced the yang fish. Xiaohua was not slow either. Almost at the same time, he also pierced the 9 heavens divine thunder into the yin fish. Boom! The yin-yang fish shook. The entire starry sky shook, and all the stars emitted brilliant starlight. "Stop!" Xueqi shouted again. The silver light around him shone brightly, and the dragon-like thunder poured into the yang fish.
Fall.
Xiaohua roared. The 9 heavens divine thunder, which was not inferior to Xueqi's, also surged into the yin fish. A crack, crack, crack. Another obscure sound was heard. The huge yin-yang fish indeed showed signs of stopping. However, just as a look of joy appeared on Fairy Xingyu's face, crack. With a crisp sound, the 9 heavens divine thunder activated by Xiaohua broke out of thin air. The power of the backlash hit Xiaohua's chest like a big hand. Xiaohua could not maintain his figure. With a boom, he rushed into the sky. Fairy Xingyu was shocked. Her figure swayed and landed beside Xiaohua. She raised her hand to support him and looked at Xiaohua's face again. "Senior." Xiaohua smiled bitterly. "Your power of thunder is too overbearing. I can't match it. Therefore, the yin-yang fish can't be balanced and can't stop at all. This is the least amount of force needed to stop the yin-yang fish." Xueqi was not surprised. He said faintly, "Why don't I try to reduce the force again?" "Okay," Xiaohua responded. The two of them activated the power of thunder again. Sure enough, their forces were balanced this time. The yin-yang fish showed signs of stopping. However, it was just a trend. It did not really stop. The two of them had no choice but to stop and look at each other. "This is a dilemma." Xiaohua frowned. "If you use too much force, I can't cooperate. If you use too little force, the yin-yang fish can't stop. What should we do?" "Why don't I try again? Fairy Xingyu looked at Xueqi and said, "My power of the stars and moon is more feminine. It can complement your power of thunder. Let's try it." Xueqi said helplessly, "The power of the stars and moon is too soft. It can't restrain the power of the stars in the yin-yang fish. I'm afraid that my lightning power alone won't be able to stop the yin-yang fish." "Don't be impatient." Xiao Hua's heart stirred as he asked, "Senior, is there also a difference between yin and yang in the power of thunder?" "Of course." Xueqi nodded and said, "The power of lightning is not only divided into yin and yang, it is also divided into heavenly stem and earthly branch, and it is also divided into the 5 elements, such as Gingxin metal lightning, Jia Yi wood lightning, Bing Ding fire lightning, Wu Ji earth lightning, etc. These are all recorded in Senior's unstoppable thunderbolt." Xiao Hua interrupted Xueqi's words and asked, Yes." Xueqi replied. Then, Xiao Hua raised his hand, activating the dark underworld devil lightning as he asked, "Is this considered soft lightning?"
Ah?
Xueqi was shocked. This is the dark nether devil lightning? You. Senior doesn't need to care about the lightning power. Senior only needs to say whether or not it can be used. Xiao Hua's expression didn't change as he asked, not giving Xueqi a chance to ask more questions. "Of course." Xueqi replied meaningfully. "Let's try again." Xiao Hua flew onto the yin fish again. Boom. Xueqi and Xiao Hua attacked again at the same time. The yin-yang fish finally began to slow down as it trembled. Good. Fairy Xingyu stopped being surprised and couldn't help but be secretly happy. However, at this moment, boom. The dark underworld devil lightning in Xiao Hua's hand was cut into several pieces again. Xiao Hua's figure was not sent flying this time. Instead, he was dispirited on the spot, the brilliance around his body dimming. "Xiao Hua." Fairy Xingyu was also moved and called out with concern. Just as she was about to fly over, Xiao Hua stood up stubbornly and said in a hoarse voice, "I understand, Senior. Although it is a balance of yin and yang, the power of my yin thunder is too weak and can't match Senior's yang."
Yes.
Xueqi's voice was also moved. He whispered, "So your injury is more serious than last time?" "Forget it." Fairy Xingyu looked at the immortal qi in the yin-yang fish that was about to disappear and said, "Xiao Hua, don't try again. You can cultivate for another 1,000 years. Let's wait for the next time." "No need." Xiao Hua raised his hand and covered his chest. He activated the 5 qis unification technique and said, "I know how to cooperate with Senior. Your dermic powers are insufficient. This is the fundamental problem." Fairy Xingyu shook her head and said, "It can't be forced." "Senior." Xiao Hua ignored Fairy Xingyu and flew up. He said to Xueqi, "Are you ready?" "Yes." Xueqi was really moved. He nodded and didn't say anything to dissuade him. At this time, only men understood men's hearts. Women had to step aside. "Rise." Xiao Hua closed his eyes slightly and raised his hand to slap the top of his head. Boom. The 5 qis righteous thunder, 9 heavens divine thunder, 3 corpses yin thunder, and dark underworld devil lightning were unleashed at the same time. A 4-colored hand made a trembling sound and fell toward the yin fish. When the power of life and death from the 4-colored hand fell, all the stars in the yin fish immediately dimmed. This. Even Xueqi was dumbfounded, let alone Fairy Xingyu. He stuttered a few words and then came to his senses. He hurriedly activated the power of thunder and landed on the yang fish. Woo, woo, woo. There was a sound that sounded like the wailing of ghosts and the howling of wolves. The entire starry sky shook. The yin-yang fish, which had been rotating since ancient times, slowly stopped and gradually became still. The moment it stopped, the entire starry sky dimmed, and all the halos of the stars turned into still whirlpools. "Open!" Xueqi and Xiao Hua looked at each other and roared at the same time. As the two of them activated their immortal qi and dermic powers, boom! The entire starry sky shone brightly. Countless whirlpools rotated in reverse, and the yin-yang fish also rotated in reverse. In just the moment of the reversal, boom! Xiao Hua's figure was sent flying again. Countless space fragments flashed around him. Streaks of thick blood marks appeared silently and strangely on his body. Whoosh! At the same time that Xiao Hua was sent flying by the backlash, the yin-yang fish opened up like a rainstorm. A water-like silver light gushed out from inside. Fairy Xingyu was overjoyed. However, she did not rush in. Instead, she raised her hand and supported Xiao Hua's falling figure. Her right hand wrapped around Xiao Hua's waist, and they flew into the yin-yang fish that had opened up. When they entered the yin-yang fish, Fairy Xingyu's left hand took out an item from her waist and stuffed it into Xiao Hua's arms. She whispered in his ear, "Humph, seeing how you put in so much effort, Zhaixing Lu and Moon Embracing Palace will benefit you." Seeing that Fairy Xingyu had finally given him Xingyu, Xiao Hua was overjoyed. However, how could he be happy at this time? He had used all his dermic powers to help Xueqi forcefully reverse the yin-yang fish and break the starry sky restriction with the help of the four-colored thunderbolt. However, all his dermic powers could not match Xueqi's thunderbolt power. He had only relied on the Tao of life and death in the four-colored thunderbolt to catch up with Xueqi in terms of realm and dermic powers and barely reverse the yin-yang fish. Xiao Hua could handle it with ease if he fought with others. However, compared to Xueqi's immortal spirit power, it was impossible for him to retract and release it freely. The moment the yin-yang fish was broken, he would immediately suffer a backlash from his dermic powers. Although he was not seriously injured, it was difficult for him to move for a while. Senior, Xiao Hua used the 5 Qis unifications technique to repair his internal organs and Taoist cultivation methods to condense his nascent soul. He opened his mouth again, but he didn't send a voice transmission. He merely mouthed, "Aren't you afraid that Senior Su will be jealous of us being so intimate?" Humph. Fairy Xingyu pursed her lips and sent a voice transmission. "In terms of lifespan, I can be your aunt for many generations. What is there to be jealous about?"
See?
Fairy Xingyu had sent a voice transmission to Xiao Hua, but when she took Xiao Hua through the yin-yang fish and saw the strange scene in the starry sky, she couldn't help but scream again. However, the starry sky behind the yin-yang fish was different from before. The stars in the starry sky were no longer bright stars. Instead, they were huge spheres. Some of the spheres were like blazing fireballs, emitting light. Some of the spheres were like water mist and ice chips. Some of the spheres had rings formed from huge amounts of crushed stones. Some of the planets had 2 or 3 small spheres revolving around them. Most of the spheres were suspended in the air by themselves, without any light or shadow. It was not the dazzling starlight that Xiao Hua had seen with his naked eye. In the vast and boundless starry sky, another irregular crack appeared in an area of tens of thousands of miles. Silver light poured out from this crack, and celestial spiritual energy rushed out like a heavenly river. It endlessly landed in this part of the starry sky, and wherever the silver light passed, it formed a pillar of light. At the bottom of the light column was an iron-green planet. The planet had been penetrated by the light column, and many cracks had appeared on the edge of the planet. The immortal spirit Qi had covered tens of thousands of miles of space. Compared to the space in other places, this space had obviously collapsed. When the brilliance of the light ball shone on it, it was extremely distorted. This is not the passage to the immortal realm. Fairy Xingyu was surprised and shouted again, "This is a crack in the immortal realm." That's right. Su Zhizao flew in and understood with a sweep of his mind. He said calmly, "This should be a crack that appeared on the surface of the immortal realm when the Star Moon Palace appeared. However, even if it is a crack, you can still return to the immortal realm through this crack. Xingyu, hurry up. The crack is really shrinking. If we don't speed up, when the crack disappears, our efforts will be in vain." Chapter 45-51. Okay. Fairy Xingyu replied. She released her hand and placed Xiaohua in the air. She glanced at Xiaohua and said, Xiaohua, the light pillar of the immortal realm is in front of you. You can't get close without an immortal spiritual body. Thank you for your help. Xueqi and I will wait for you in the immortal realm. Xiaohua nodded with a smile and replied, Don't say anything. Let's go quickly. When I ascend to the immortal realm, I will immediately find you and Senior Su. It's a deal. Fairy Xingyu knew that time was of the essence, so she didn't say anything more. She nodded at Xiaohua and flew to Xueqi. Let's go. Xueqi hesitated for a moment and also moved. At this time, Fairy Xingyu didn't have to worry about anything. The silver light around her shone brightly, and an oppressive pressure appeared. Her figure swayed, and she fell into the silver light in the distance. Xueqi also let out a long roar. His figure flashed and appeared at the edge of the silver light. Fairy Xingyu fell into the silver light, and her figure began to slowly expand. The silver light around her merged with the light pillar, and Princess Baihua's body was revealed again. Princess Baihua was still beautiful, but her body was riddled with holes. As the silver light fell, her flesh and blood were cut off piece by piece, turning into wisps of green smoke. A light cluster of thousands of feet in size gradually emerged in the light pillar. In the light cluster, a silver mark was particularly eye-catching. The mark absorbed the immortal spiritual qi and shone brightly. An incomparably mysterious outline of a body gradually emerged. Xiaohua, thank you very much. Fairy Xingyu's voice sounded like thunder. Xueqi, let's go. See you in the immortal realm? Xiaohua smiled and urged his magic power to resist the pressure of the immortal realm. He raised his hand and gestured. But at this moment, Xueqi's faint voice sounded. Xingyu, you can go by yourself. I won't go back to the immortal realm with you. Ah? Not only was Xiaohua shocked, but Fairy Xingyu was also stunned on the spot. The light around her flickered incessantly.
Why?
Why don't you go back to the immortal realm? Fairy Xingyu looked at the slowly closing crack and hurriedly asked, You and I have been busy for so many years. Now that we have finally reached the edge of the immortal world, why don't you go back? Xingyu. Xueqi opened his mouth, his tone as calm as ever. When I saved you back then, I was already heavily injured because I fought with the Heavenly Court's Book Immortal. Why hasn't he recovered after so many years? How is this possible? Fairy Xingyu shouted, You did take a blow for me. But how could that injury not be healed? You haven't said anything for so many years. Have you recovered? I was lying to you. I didn't want you to worry. Xueqi said, That demonized book Immortal was very powerful. He directly injured my soul and touched my immortal mark. You should know that immortal mark. How can it be repaired in the lower realm? All these years, I've been searching for spiritual items that can mend the immortal mark. I did the same in the heavenly sanctum. But this kind of spiritual item doesn't exist in the 3 continents. It's hard to find even in the celestial world. So, even if I'm in the pillar of light now, it'll be difficult for me to return to the immortal dimension.
How?
How is this possible? You're not lying to me, are you? Fairy Xingyu was dumbfounded and murmured. Fairy Xingyu was dumbfounded. Xiaohua was even more dumbfounded. He didn't understand, but he knew. Because Xueqi was injured, he couldn't return to the celestial world even if there was a passageway to it. In order to let Fairy Xingyu return with peace of mind, he had been hiding this news. In an instant, Xiaohua thought of many things. Many things from before seemed to be clear to him. He couldn't help but look at Fairy Xingyu, who was covered in silver light. Like Xiaohua, Fairy Xingyu's previous details had already emerged in her mind. Because Xueqi couldn't return, he gave his inheritance and the inheritance of Qingqiu Mountain to Xiaohua without holding anything back. Even when entering the Xingyue Palace, Xueqi activated the immortal qi at all costs to stimulate the formation of the Starry Passage. Even when he found the corpses of the 2 celestial masters in the Yiqiong heavenly mansion, Xueqi didn't take any of them and let Fairy Xingyu keep them. On the one hand, it was because he was protecting Xingyu and wanted to give all the credit to her. On the other hand, he couldn't return to the celestial world, so he could only let Xingyu take these things away. At this time, Fairy Xingyu also remembered that Xueqi had also been looking for something in the Yiqiong heavenly mansion. Fairy Xingyu didn't understand at the time, but now she realized that Xueqi was looking for healing elixirs. Although Xueqi knew that it was just an extravagant hope, he still didn't want to give up. Thinking of this, Fairy Xingyu recalled all kinds of things. When they were in the hidden immortal continent, Xueqi was indifferent to her and deliberately created a barrier between them. He even kept his distance in the flower realm. It wasn't that Xueqi didn't want to chat with her, but that he didn't want her to fall too deep. Some of the words at that time were Xueqi's farewell words. Although Xueqi really wanted to harden his heart, he couldn't in the end. His words were ambiguous. At that time, Fairy Xingyu was unhappy and didn't quite understand. Now, she understood Xueqi's painstaking efforts. When she thought of how Xueqi risked his life to fight the immortal beast in the Yiqiong heavenly mansion, Fairy Xingyu couldn't help but tremble. Fairy Xingyu shouted, "Xueqi, how can you do this to me?" Hearing Fairy Xingyu's cries, Xueqi couldn't help but feel heartbroken. A hero's breath was short, and love was long. The feelings that had accompanied him for so many years turned into tenderness at this moment. Kacha. With a burst of cracking sounds, the chains that had previously bound the silver light broke inch by inch. Xueqi's figure also turned into 1,000 feet in size. However, after the silver light disappeared, Xueqi's body, which was only left with white bones, was revealed. This body was melting at an extremely fast speed. However, after the white bones disappeared, the silver spots that should have been eye-catching in the light cluster that Xueqi had transformed into were now dim and even mottled. When the immortal chi fell, the whole spots were trembling. At the same time, Xueqi's silvery outline gradually sank in the silver light pillar. He couldn't fly up at all like Fairy Xingyu. Seeing Xueqi's immortal mark like this, how could Fairy Xingyu not know that Xueqi was telling the truth? She flew down and hugged Xueqi's entire body. Her sobs reverberated through the entire starry sky like rain. "Xueqi, you really deserve to die. How could you make me fall in love with you so much? And you abandoned me just like that. You let me return to the immortal world alone. Even if the immortal world has a long life and endless years, how can those years be spent with you by my side?" Fairy Xingyu's cultivation was obviously no match for Xueqi. Xueqi's falling silhouette dragged her down slowly. Xueqi said emotionally, "Xingyu, since it's love, it doesn't matter how long it is. I'm already satisfied that I can accompany you for so many days. You still have a long way to go, and you have a lot of cultivation to go. You'd better go back quickly." "No way," Fairy Xingyu cried. "I'd rather not return to the immortal world to be with you." "What nonsense!" Xueqi replied, "If you don't return to the immortal world, how can I recover from my injuries? If you don't return to the immortal world, who will come back to pick me up in the future? Besides, I've found a way to enter the Star Moon Palace this time. The next time the Star Moon Palace appears, Xiaohua and I will come in again. Didn't you say that this is the last time the Star Moon Palace opens? Your divination skills have never been wrong." Fairy Xingyu didn't give up, as if she didn't believe Xueqi's words. Xueqi hurriedly replied, "How can the divination skills be accurate? That day, I divined that Xiaohua would be my help in returning to the immortal world. But my immortal mark has been damaged. How can I return? So, how can the so-called last time be taken seriously?" The Star Moon Palace had existed for God knows how many years since ancient times. How could it not appear just like that? Besides, if you can find the holy lotus seed of the Buddha fruit, you can also come in through this crack. You'd better go quickly. The crack of the immortal world is about to close. If you can't leave, I can't go back either. Holy lotus seed. Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He hurriedly urged his body to rush over, but He was a cultivator of the human tribe. How could he resist the light pillar of the immortal world? It was impossible for him to get within 100 miles of the light pillar. Senior, Xiao Hua said loudly, what is the holy lotus seed? Maybe I have it here. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua's words still couldn't break through the light pillar. Xueqi and Fairy Xingyu couldn't hear him at all. Fairy Xingyu came to her senses and nodded. That's right. You're right. I'll hurry back to the immortal world. Just you wait, Xueqi. I'll definitely find the holy lotus seed of the Buddha kingdom for you. I'll risk my life for it. With that, Fairy Xingyu hugged Xueqi and kissed him fiercely on the lips. Then, she reluctantly let go of him and urged her body to fly toward the top of the light pillar. The light pillar, which had shrouded an area of tens of thousands of miles, became narrower as Fairy Xingyu flew higher. The crack above her head actually shrank at an accelerated rate. Xueqi's silhouette could no longer stay in the silver light. When he was about to fly out, his whole body suddenly expanded. Boom! An armor flew out of the silver light and landed on the silver light. Amidst the vibrating sound, the 10,000-foot figure slowly shrank again. However, Xiao Hua could see clearly that on Xueqi's shrunken silver body, layers of grayish-black light fell and turned into nothingness. Wisps of faint fishy smell also drifted over from afar and rushed into Xiao Hua's mouth and nose. Even Xueqi's immortal spiritual pressure felt weak when it landed on Xiao Hua's body. It was far less powerful than before. What's going on? Xiao Hua was a little surprised and looked at Xueqi in a daze. However, at this time, Xueqi didn't pay attention to Xiao Hua. Instead, he looked up at the gradually shrinking and disappearing light pillar with a focused expression. Xiao Hua looked at this unyielding man and didn't dare to ask. He just quietly accompanied Fairy Xingyu and watched her return to the immortal world. Chapter 45-52. Seeing Fairy Xingyu fall into the crack of the immortal realm, the brilliance of the immortal mark flashed. There was no resistance from the law of the realm. Xueqi felt relieved. He turned around and said to Xiao Hua without hesitation, let's go. Yes, Senior. Xiao Hua sighed in his heart, but he still asked, Senior, what is the holy lotus seed? The holy lotus seed is something from the Buddhist kingdom, Xueqi explained. Unfortunately, before he could finish speaking, a thunderous voice rang out behind him. Xueqi, you dare to lie to me? Ah! Xiao Hua was shocked. Wasn't this voice Fairy Xingyu? He hurriedly turned his head, but the instant he did so, an extremely loud bang rang out from the starry sky. Then, an irresistible power of the world descended from above. Xiao Hua felt the entire starry sky tremble violently, and the tremendous power mercilessly landed on his back. He watched as the starry sky before his eyes swayed and fell. Tens of thousands of rays of light were annihilated, and his body plummeted rapidly, like a falling rock. Xingyue, what are you doing? Xueqi's furious voice rang in Xiao Hua's ears again, but it was soon covered by the huge whistling wind. In just a few breaths, Xiao Hua's body became light, and the entire space stabilized. When Xiao Hua looked around, wasn't he in front of the starry sky from before? Xueqi, Fairy Xingyu's voice rang out very gently. You've already experienced the third decay of immortals. How can I return to the immortal realm with peace of mind? You've been with me for so many years. Why don't you let me accompany you for a few more years? Do you? Xueqi said 2 words, but he couldn't say anything else. Xiao Hua turned his head and saw that Fairy Xingyu had returned. At this time, her body was shrouded by a layer of star gauze, and she had turned into the same size as Xueqi. Her appearance was the same as Xueqi's, so he couldn't see it. However, their hands were tightly clasped together, and their hearts were much closer than before. Xueqi looked at Fairy Xingyu and didn't speak for a long time. After a long while, he said, Why do you have to do this? If it weren't for you back then, I would have turned into a pile of bones. Fairy Xingyu replied faintly, All these years, if it weren't for your company, I would have been possessed by the devil. Your heart. I couldn't guess it at first, and I didn't dare to point it out. I was afraid that my thoughts would be different from yours. Now that you and I are of one mind, why can't we fly without the wings of the colorful phoenix? If you can return to the immortal realm, then I'll have hope as well. Now that you've returned, the crack in the immortal realm has disappeared. My hope. Xueqi sighed. Unfortunately, before Xueqi could finish, Fairy Xingyu raised her hand to cover his mouth and whispered, "Don't lie to me. Your immortal's third decay is already very serious. You probably won't have the chance, nor will you be able to occupy another human body. You don't have much time left. If I return to the immortal world, how will I be able to see you again?" Sigh. Xueqi said regretfully. In the end, I didn't harden my heart. Naturally, Fairy Xingyu had noticed that Xueqi's immortal spirit body was different because she had kissed him on the lips. Therefore, she smiled and said, "That's because I'm charming. Moreover, if it weren't for that kiss, wouldn't I have regretted it for the rest of my life?" Xueqi, who had no psychological burden, was obviously more talkative. He said with a smile, "Now I'm the one who will regret it for the rest of my life." "Humph, I'm with you. What do you have to regret?" Fairy Xingyu rebuked. "Why aren't you leaving? If you're any slower, I'll also regret it for the rest of my life." "Leave? Where to?" Xueqi was a little puzzled. "Naturally, to other starry skies." Fairy Xingyu replied, "Since there are cracks in the immortal realm in this starry sky, maybe other starry skies also have rare treasures from the immortal realm. If you and I are fated, we may be able to find something similar to the holy lotus seed." Xueqi thought for a moment and nodded. "You're right. Although we know where those starry skies are, we rarely go to check them out. Maybe there will be some surprises waiting for us. The most important thing is..." Fairy Xingyu tightened her grip on Xueqi's hand and said, "My happiness lies in these starry skies." At this point, Fairy Xingyu looked at Xiaohua and said, "Xiaohua, are you willing to help us?"
Of course.
Xiaohua nodded firmly. "I'm honored to witness the love between two immortals. Let's go." Fairy Xingyu and Xueqi urged their figures and flew toward the starry skies not far away. Xiaohua followed the two immortals. The smell of blood drifted past his nose and mouth. Even if he closed his mouth and nose, he could still smell it. Xiaohua felt a little sour in his heart. Even someone as strong as Xueqi, a law enforcer of the immortal realm, would have his third decay. Life and death were everywhere in this world. However, at the same time, he was extremely gratified. If he could smell the blood from so far away, what about Fairy Xingyu? Xueqi's beloved was like this. Even if he died, his heart would not be broken. The starry skies next to them was still a starry skies maze. In the face of Xiaohua's terrifying sense of direction in the void, even an immortal would have to admit defeat. Xiaohua did not spend too much effort to break the starry skies maze. What appeared in front of Xueqi and Fairy Xingyu was an array that flickered with many rays of light. However, Xueqi and Fairy Xingyu did not hesitate. They each reached into Silverlight's chest and took out two cracked tiger talismans. These tiger talismans were even stranger. One was large and the other was small. Moreover, there was a token arrow piercing through the abdomen of the tiger talisman. When the two of them breathed out immortal qi, the two tiger talismans glowed with silver light and turned into the shape of a dragon and a tiger. When the two tiger talismans rushed into the array, the entire starry sky was strangely divided into two from the middle. What was beyond the starry sky made Xiaohua's jaw drop. It was a palace that looked like a hall. This palace was so big that it was as wide as heaven and earth. Xiaohua's divine thought could not see the end. Fairy Xingyu spread her divine thought and then raised her hand. A palm-sized key fell into her hand. "Let's go." Fairy Xingyu originally wanted to take the key, but when she looked at the empty palace, her interest waned. She said this and was about to throw the key away. Xiaohua hurriedly shouted, "Senior, leave this to me." "Well, take it, you little miser." Fairy Xingyu did not ask any more questions and casually threw the key to Xiaohua. Xiaohua caught the key. Before he could take a look, the surrounding starry skies surged out again like a tide and pushed them out. Then, Xiaohua followed Xueqi and Fairy Xingyu to 4 starry skies that sealed off their divine thoughts. Xueqi and Fairy Xingyu were not prepared and could not enter one of them, but they could enter the other 3 starry skies. The situation in the starry skies was different, and the items obtained were also different. One was a thumb-sized crystal-like object, another was a small halberd, and the last was a token. Although the 3 items had extraordinary origins, and even Fairy Xingyu could not tell the reason, she was concerned about Xueqi at this moment. Everything in her eyes was like dung. Without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, she gave them all to him. Xiaohua also took them without saying anything and directly sent them into the space. As Xiaohua had expected, these items did not fall into the Shenhua continent. Instead, they fell into different spaces. The crystal-like object even fell into the spiritual realm. When they came out of the last starry sky, Fairy Xingyu casually pointed to a starry sky and said, "Let's go there." "Yes, Senior," Xiaohua responded and was about to fly up. However, Fairy Xingyu said indifferently, "There is no need to break the array here." Xiaohua was stunned. He had a bad feeling in his heart. Seeing Fairy Xingyu take Xueqi's hand and rush into the starry sky, Xiaohua slowly followed behind them. Sure enough, there was no array or door in the starry sky. There was only a sky full of stars, like eyes looking at Xiaohua with ridicule. Xiaohua sighed and thought to himself, "The Star Moon Palace is a mysterious ancient divine object. There are endless secrets in it. Even this resplendent starry sky has many secrets. There might be the holy lotus seed that Xueqi needs." However, powerful immortals like Xueqi and Fairy Xingyu could only find out so much after so many years. Sometimes human strength is limited. This is indeed the case. Presumably, they have no more hope. Xiaohua did not dare to say more. He stood quietly in the starry sky. In the distance, the 2 silver figures were snuggling together. There was no longer the majesty of the supreme divine powers of the 3 continents. What was left was only sweetness and desolation.
No.
After a few minutes, Fairy Xingyu, who was curled up in Xueqi's arms, suddenly raised her head and said stubbornly, "I can't give up like this. Xueqi, let's rush over the platform and go to the hall. The starry sky there is a corner of the immortal realm. There might be some opportunities." "No need." Xueqi shook his head and said, "We have not been able to gather the required credentials for that forbidden area for tens of thousands of years. Even if we get there, we can't go in. No, if we don't go and take a look, I really can't accept it." Fairy Xingyu was equally determined. "All right then." Xueqi could not resist Fairy Xingyu. He turned to Xiaohua and said, "Xiaohua, after the platform is a place that we explored for the 2nd time. There are a lot of credentials there. We have not been able to gather them, so we never went there again. It is very dangerous after the platform. The extremely mysterious thunder I told you about before is behind the platform. This thunder is even more difficult to guard against than the forbidden array of the Ghost Plane. We still have some resistance, but none of the cultivators of the 3 continents can resist it. You don't have to go there. Stay here and meditate on the starry sky maze. When the Star Moon Palace is closed, the power of the stars and the moon will naturally send you out of the Star Moon Palace." Chapter 45-53. Senior. Xiaohua looked at Fairy Xingyu beside him and asked very sincerely, "Can you tell this junior the truth?" "As long as it doesn't involve the immortal realm," Xueqi answered seriously. Unfortunately, before Xueqi could finish, Xiaohua interrupted him with tears in his eyes and said, "I just want to ask, can you hold on until the Star Moon Palace closes? Can I still see you in the 3 continents?" Xueqi hesitated and said, "Xiaohua, these words are meaningless now. I hope that the next time the Star Moon Palace opens, you can help Xingyu and send her back to the immortal realm." Xiao Hua's heart was suddenly wet. He nodded and said, "Senior, please don't worry. I'd rather not ascend and wait until the Star Moon Palace reappears. Also, I promise you that I'll definitely find a thunder cultivator with the same cultivation as me. We'll definitely help Fairy Xingyu return to the immortal realm." "Good. Then I'm relieved." Xueqi nodded and said with a smile, "I really didn't expect to meet a little friend like you here. Your temperament makes me think of many things, and I'm very pleased. If fate wills it, we'll meet again." "Senior, there's no need to say goodbye now." Xiao Hua bit his lip and said, "I also want to accompany you on your journey. I wonder if you're willing to guide me?" "Sai, why do you have to do this?" Xueqi was a little helpless. He looked at Fairy Xingyu and hoped that she would persuade Xiao Hua. Fairy Xingyu also sighed and said, "Xueqi, it's rare for Xiao Hua to have such good intentions. Let him go. Otherwise he'll feel terrible. Moreover, with us around, the thunder on the platform may not cause any harm to him." "Okay." Xueqi nodded and flew out of the starry sky with Fairy Xingyu toward another part of the starry sky. Just like when they entered the starry sky, it was another seemingly endless starry sky. After flying for a while, they rushed out of the starry sky and saw a greenish-white platform in front of them. It was much clearer than what Xiao Hua had seen earlier. "Xiao Hua," Xueqi reminded him, "don't go too far from our silver light. If you feel anything wrong, run away immediately." "Yes, senior." Xiao Hua nodded his head vigorously. This reminder reminded him of his master helplessness. At first, he was dissatisfied with helplessness's attitude, but now that he had a disciple, he understood helplessness's painstaking efforts. Unfortunately, when helplessness self-destructed in the end, Xiao Hua realized that everything was already too late. Now that he'd met such a good teacher and friend like Xueqi, how could he not cherish the last moments he had with Xueqi? The platform was very calm. There was no danger as Xueqi had described. Not to mention the sound of thunder, there was not even the sound of wind. Swoosh! Just when the three of them were carefully flying towards the back of the platform, the sound of flowing sand was suddenly heard from the greenish-white far away. Xueqi and the others stopped and turned around to look. On the other side of the platform, nearly 20 great demons of the demon clan were flying close to the platform. Most of the 20 great demons were at the sun-devouring realm. Among them, there were actually 2 demon kings at the Na Tian realm. When the great demons saw Xueqi and Fairy Xingyu, they were all stunned. The immortal realm pressure from the power of the stars and moon was almost suffocating. "Why are you all here?" Xiao Hua flew up and asked with a frown. "This is not a place where you can come." "Greetings, seniors." When the great demons saw Xiao Hua fly out, they seemed to understand something. In the face of a grand ascension stage human, they didn't dare to be negligent and bowed respectfully. "Get up." Xiao Hua pointed to the resplendent sea of stars in the distance and said, "That is the resplendent sea of stars. There is some strange extraterritorial star force that is extremely beneficial to demon cultivators like you. If possible, you all can go there to cultivate." "Senior," Demon King Na Tian said bluntly, "I feel that the star force is not helpful for us to break through, so we want to go to this mysterious thunder formation to try our luck. The cultivation of the demon clan is very different from that of the human clan. Senior, I'm afraid you don't understand." "Haha, fine," Fairy Xingyu said with a smile. "Since you all want to go ahead." "Yes, senior," the Demon King responded. He looked around and flapped his wings slightly. The group of demons followed the Demon King and carefully flew away from the side. "Alas," Xueqi sighed. "There are always people who don't believe what others say and think they are different from others. I'm afraid they will only wake up when they are on the verge of death." "Senior, why do you sound like me?" Xiao Hua touched his nose and said in a low voice. "That's right. You're also the kind of person who won't give up until you hit the wall." Fairy Xingyu said bluntly. Then, she hit the nail on the head and said, "You are lucky. Otherwise, you would have turned into ashes." Soon after, the three of them flew forward again. although the platform looked very wide. When they really flew, Xiaohua discovered that the space of the platform seemed to be like a valley. When they flew to either side, there would always be an inexplicable tilting force that subtly affected the direction of their flight. After a short while, they would fly back to the center of the platform, unable to go far. Therefore, although the 20 or so great demons didn't want to fly together with Xueqi and the others, after flying for a while, they were still in front of Xueqi and the others. Be careful, Xueqi hurriedly reminded them in a low voice when he saw the faint outline of the green and white area in front of them. The time it takes to drink a cup of tea is the most dangerous. If the thunder restriction is not triggered, we will be safe. Unfortunately, before Xueqi could finish his words, a rumbling sound came from high up in the sky. Be careful. Xueqi was shocked and hurriedly pulled Fairy Xingyu back. However, whether it was Xueqi or Fairy Xingyu, the silver light around them flickered rapidly, like a candle in the wind, flickering unsteadily. Xueqi and Fairy Xingyu could naturally react, but the great demons in front of them couldn't. As the thunder passed, the bodies of the 3 great demons flashed with starlight, and then they expanded sharply. Bang, bang, bang. Their bodies exploded, and the broken demonic beasts also disappeared into nothingness in the thunder. When they looked at Xiaohua again, the sound of thunder was like the whole platform falling down and smashing straight into his mind. However, as soon as this violent impact fell into Xiaohua's body, the Hongmeng immortal qi in his lower dantian was stimulated with a boom, covering the scattered nascent souls and more than 100 of them. Moreover, the truth of heaven and earth in the Hongmeng immortal qi also turned into waves that flowed rapidly in Xiaohua's body. Not only that, but the crystal-like godhead hidden in Xiaohua's sea of consciousness also inexplicably revealed itself. When the violent impact landed on Xiaohua's body, it actually turned into a peculiar fluctuation that rushed into the scenery-like godhead. As the scenery-like godhead shone with a wrinkled luster, Xiaohua actually heard cryptic and indescribable voices in his ears.
Huh?
This voice sounds like the magical power used by devouring heaven and the others on the primitive continent. Xiaohua was stunned and hurriedly activated his secret technique. Sure enough, the voice sounded in Xiaohua's mind again. Fa Wucheng Fa. Xiaohua. Seeing the golden light flashing around Xiaohua and him standing there motionless, as if he was possessed, Xueqi became anxious. He raised his hand and grabbed, trying to pull Xiaohua away. However, as soon as his big silver hand touched the golden light around Xiaohua, it immediately collapsed.
Huh?
Xueqi was shocked because he could clearly feel that there was a power in Xiaohua's golden light that was beyond his reach. It was this power that had defeated his big hand. However, when Xueqi's big silver hand collapsed, the sound of thunder had turned into a lingering sound and gradually dissipated. Let's go. Without waiting for Xueqi to ask more, Fairy Xingyu urged again. The 2 of them flashed and flew forward. However, they didn't dare to teleport because they had also encountered the law of time and knew that speed was limited here. Xiaohua was a little regretful because he didn't finish listening to that sentence. When Xueqi and Fairy Xingyu flew past, Xiaohua hurriedly rushed into the depths of the platform. To Xiaohua's surprise, the group of great demons didn't show any fear after losing 3 of their great demons. They still accelerated their flying speed and rushed inside like Xueqi and the others. Seeing the light and shadow of a tower-like pavilion appear in the distance of the bluish-white platform, Xueqi hurriedly sent a voice transmission. Xiaohua, when we reach that pavilion, we will be out of the range of the thunder restriction. We will be safe. Fairy Xingyu smiled bitterly and said, I'm afraid it's not that simple. Sure enough, before Fairy Xingyu could finish speaking, rumbling sounds could be heard. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Thunderclaps fell from the sky like drums. This thunderbolt was different from the previous one. As soon as it fell into Xiaohua's ears, it turned into an indescribable wave. This wave rushed into Xiaohua's body, internal organs, lower dantian, and other parts of his body, giving birth to all kinds of inexplicable law of space. Xiaohua felt that his body was expanding like countless spaces, and he couldn't control them at all. However, when this wave fell into his lower dantian and rushed into the crystal-like godhead, it also triggered the truth of heaven and earth in the Hongmeng purple vapor and the divine power in the crystal-like godhead. Under this mysterious power, the countless new spaces in Xiaohua's body expanded again and again. Then, they turned into words that fell into Xiaohua's heart. If there is a law in the human world, then the law is untraceable. If there is a law in the immortal world, then the law is unsystematic. If there is a Tao, then the Tao cannot be named. This voice was obviously different from the previous one, but every word carried an indescribable mystery. It was as if every word was a world, and every word was a thunderbolt. Whoosh! The silver light around Fairy Xingyu and Xueqi was torn apart. The two of them had no time to care about Xiaohua now. They fled in a sorry state and looked at the group of great demons. Bang, bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. Without any suspense, even the demon king Na Tian turned into nothingness in this thunderbolt that contained the truth of heaven and earth and contained the law of space. Chapter 45-54. If people have laws, then laws will be untraceable. If immortals have laws, then laws will be unsystematic. If gods have Tao, then Tao cannot be named. Although Xiaohua could not understand, he understood that laws could not be passed on. Not everyone who could hear the laws could understand the laws. Those who were not fated to hear the laws would be punished by God even if they heard the laws. Xiaohua still wanted to listen attentively, but after a burst of thunder, there was no more sound. Fairy Xingyu's tentative voice came again. Xiaohua, you're fine? Let's go. Xiaohua could not explain his strangeness, so he could only change the topic. Let's go to that pavilion first. Xueqi and Fairy Xingyu suppressed their astonishment and followed Xiaohua to the outline of the pavilion. Xueqi and Fairy Xingyu were very glad, but Xiaohua was disappointed. After flying over the platform, there was no more thunder. In front of them was the outline of half of the broken pavilion. After being killed by the mysterious thunder, the silver light around Xueqi began to turn gray and rusty, almost covering the whole light and shadow. Pieces of gray and silver light turned into fragments and fell, and the fishy smell now turned into the smell of decay. Going from here. Without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, Fairy Xingyu raised her hand and pointed. Her entire right hand left her body and landed on a part of the silhouette. The silver light made a sizzling sound and turned into a very complicated pattern of a palace door in the darkness of the huge silhouette. Puff! Fairy Xingyu spat out a mouthful of immortal spirit qi. The door of the palace with only a pattern opened, and a primitive aura fell from inside. Of course, the situation inside the palace could not be seen clearly from outside the door. However, when Xiaohua flew in with Xueqi and Fairy Xingyu, it was an eye-opener for him, because there was a huge starry sky above the palace. This starry sky was different from before. It was not densely covered with stars. Instead, there were 12 groups of stars that formed a strange star formation above the starry sky. Xiaohua could not understand these star formations. He asked in confusion, "Senior, is this the star map of your immortal world?" "That's right." Fairy Xingyu nodded and said, "There is a starry sky in the immortal world like this. Our Palace of Justice calls it the 12 earthly branches star array." Xueqi took out 7 strange tokens from his bosom and explained with a strange tone, "In my hometown, there are 12 zodiac signs. They are Zishu, Chowox, Inhu Mao Rabbit, Chenlong, Sea Snake, Wu Ma, Wei Yang, Shin Monkey, Yu Rooster, Su Dog, and Hai Pig." They also saw the 12 earthly branches as the 12 commonly seen animals. "Look, doesn't that star array look like a rat? Doesn't that star array look like a cow?" As he spoke, Xueqi raised his hand and waved, causing 7 tokens to fly into the air. They were the rat head token, dragon head token, horse head token, sheep head token, monkey head token, chicken head token, and dog head token. Then, he explained in a desolate manner, after Xingyu and I saw the 12 earthly branches star array for the second time, we deliberately searched for these tokens in the 3 continents. However, with our limited strength, Xingyu and I were only able to find these 7 tokens. We couldn't find any of the other 5 tokens, so although we know that this place may be related to the immortal realm, we can't do anything about it. Looking at the 7 tokens, Xiaohua smiled, and a string of tears of happiness couldn't help but flow down. He said in a low voice, "Senior, if you can find all 12 tokens, then it'll be strange."
Oh, why?
Xueqi was slightly stunned. Seeing the tears in the corners of Xiaohua's eyes, Fairy Xingyu suddenly understood and exclaimed, "I understand. Those tokens are from the Dawn Rain continent." "Yes, that's right." Xiaohua, Yu. Seeing that Fairy Xingyu had lost her composure, Xiaohua did not dare to delay any longer. He raised his hand and took out the tiger head token, the ox head token and the pig head token, the snake head token, and the rabbit head token from the mysterious water palace in the Pure Land world. He also took out the tiger head token, the ox head token, and the pig head token, which he had obtained from the demonic beast storage ring on Sunset Island. How is this possible? Xueqi could not help but be stunned. Could it be that my divination skill is really... That's right. Xiaohua nodded vigorously. "Senior, don't worry. There must be the holy lotus seed you need behind the star array of the 12 zodiac signs. But the passage to the immortal realm..." Xueqi was puzzled. "Xueqi," Fairy Xingyu said with a smile, "as long as you are here, the immortal realm is everywhere. Your divination skill is correct." Good. Xueqi was also overjoyed. At this time, he no longer had the strength to activate the zodiac token. He responded and looked at Fairy Xingyu. Fairy Xingyu opened her mouth, and a mouthful of immortal qi fell on the rat head token. The rat head token suddenly expanded. Fairy Xingyu raised her hand and pointed at it. The token flew under a star array. When the token approached, all the stars on the star array emitted starlight and fell into the token. The starlight on the token shone brightly and turned into a lifelike rat that rushed into the star array. Boom. The starry sky shook and the star array tumbled. A moment later, a white jade box engraved with a rat pattern flew out of the star array. Fairy Xingyu hurriedly waved her hand, and the jade box fell into her hand. She carefully opened it and glanced at it. She could not help but feel a little disappointed and handed it to Xueqi. Xueqi glanced at it and frowned. He then handed it to Xiaohua. Xiaohua took it and saw that it was a strange object the size of a palm. It looked like a starfish, but there were some strange fine lines on the inside. Layers of indescribable waves were generated between these fine lines. Before Xiaohua could speak, Fairy Xingyu activated the bullhead token again. The second star array was opened, and there was another jade box inside. Fairy Xingyu looked at it and gave it to Xueqi, who handed it to Xiaohua. Xiaohua glanced at it and put it into the space like the first jade box. However, it was very strange. These 2 jade boxes had landed in different spaces, and neither of them was on Shenhua continent. In the time it took to smoke a cigarette, Fairy Xingyu opened all 11 star arrays. A jade box flew out from each star array, and each jade box was placed in a different space by Xiaohua. There were even some spaces that had yet to take shape. Finally, Fairy Xingyu stood in front of the last star array and looked at the last dog head token hesitantly. Xueqi smiled and said, "The previous jade boxes were either the Buddhist Kingdom's medicine, the Heavenly Court's gold core, or the Demon League's star scorch. This last one should be the immortal elixir of our Dao sect, right?" "It should be the immortal elixir of Dao sect," Fairy Xingyu said with certainty. "But it might not be the holy lotus seed of Dao sect." "Senior." Xiaohua was confused when he heard Fairy Xingyu's words. He hurriedly asked, "Didn't you say that the holy lotus seed was an item of the Buddhist kingdom? How did it become an immortal elixir of our Dao sect?" Who told you that the holy lotus seed was an item of the Buddhist kingdom? Fairy Xingyu glared at Xiaohua and said, the holy lotus seed is an immortal elixir refined by a Tao sect pharmacist in the immortal world with the help of the lotus seeds from the lotus pond in the Buddhist kingdom. Unfortunately, Fairy Xingyu's eyes were blocked by the silver light, so Xiaohua could not see it. Xiaohua was helpless when he heard this. After all, Xueqi had only told him half of the story. Open it,
Xueqi said faintly.
The jade boxes are already behind the starry sky. It doesn't matter if it's the holy lotus seed or not. It's a fact. Okay. Just like before, Fairy Xingyu sent the dog head token into the star array. Sure enough, another jade box flew out. This time, after Fairy Xingyu took it, she did not dare to open it. It flew to Xueqi and carefully handed it over. However, she did not let go of it. At this moment, a faint golden light appeared above the starry sky, and a strange aura faintly discernible descended. However, just as this aura appeared, the golden light disappeared. Xiaohua only had time to raise his head to take a look before the aura also disappeared. However, Xiaohua did not have time to pay attention to the aura at this time. He also looked at Xueqi and Fairy Xingyu. Xueqi looked at Fairy Xingyu. The two of them each took one side of the jade box and gently opened the jade box. Looking at the contents of the jade box, the two of them did not speak for a long time. Xiaohua could not see their expressions and was a little anxious. However, he also had a bad feeling in his heart. If the holy lotus seed was inside the jade box, how could Fairy Xingyu let Xueqi look at it like this? She would have let him take it long ago. Sob. Fairy Xingyu seemed to have been too hopeful. Now that she was disappointed, she actually sobbed softly. Xueqi sighed slightly and raised his hand to pull Fairy Xingyu into his arms. He wanted to say something, but he couldn't. He only patted Fairy Xingyu's back. After a while, Fairy Xingyu raised her head from Xueqi's arms and said, Xueqi, is our luck really that bad? After so many years of searching for the Star Moon Palace, it was all in vain in the end? With you, how could it be all in vain?
Xueqi replied.
Alas. Fairy Xingyu sighed. Looking at the jade box in Xueqi's hand, she said, this clear feather elixir has benefited Xiaohua again. Haha, Xiaohua's luck is better than ours. Xueqi said and handed the jade box to Xiaohua. Xiaohua, this is the clear feather elixir used by the mortal fairies in the immortal world. Your strength is now only at the middle of the 9th level of origin power. If you want to cultivate to the upper level, it will take at most 50,000 years, at least 10,000 years. Of course, we can't rule out that you have other opportunities to shorten this time. As for this clear feather elixir, if your cultivation is stable and your realm surpasses your strength, you can take it. It will probably only take a few years for you to reach the highest realm in the 3 continents. Remember, this elixir contains the immortal spiritual qi of the immortal world. If you haven't reached the late stage of the Mahayana realm, don't take it. Oh, in addition, among the things I gave you, there is a coarse grass talisman. I refined it myself to suppress your strength. If it is not appropriate for you to take this elixir, you can use the coarse grass talisman to suppress it. Chapter 45-55. Yes, thank you, Senior. Xiaohua took the jade box and glanced at it. He was stunned for a moment before he casually stored it in his space. Sure enough, the location of the jade box was the same as the gold core that Xiaohua had obtained earlier. In addition, the things I obtained earlier were also items from the Buddhist Kingdom and the Demon League. They have similar effects as the clear feather pill. There are records of these in Xingyue's moon-embracing palace. You'll know after you take a look. Xueqi added, in the future, I hope you can help me take care of Xingyue. Xueqi. Hearing Xueqi's words, Fairy Xingyue was displeased. She interrupted Xueqi and was about to speak. Xiaohua hurriedly asked, Senior, the holy lotus seed. Shut up first. Fairy Xingyue said, wait for me to finish. How could Xiaohua wait for Fairy Xingyue to finish speaking? He waved his hand and took out the mysterious gold core he had obtained in the stacked jade legacy realm. He said, "Senior, take a look and see if this thing is useful." Seeing the mysterious golden pill fall into the starry sky, it immediately turned into a flame that was dozens of feet wide. On the surface of the flame, tens of thousands of tiny vortexes rapidly expanded, each becoming the size of a thumb. Moreover, these vortexes produced a powerful suction force. Strands of needle-like power of the stars and moon were sucked into these vortexes. The suction force of this pill was so strong that it was as if a giant hand had grabbed the space within 100 feet, causing it to distort intensely. Within the distorted space, mysterious runes flew out from the vortexes. These runes slowly flowed in the flame's threads, and their trajectories looked mysterious. Holy lotus seed? Fairy Xingyue screamed as if she had seen a ghost. Her voice was like thunder, shaking the entire starry sky. Fairy Xingyue's silver figure broke free from the control of the star veil and rushed out hundreds of feet in an instant. You, Xiao Hua. Even someone as calm as Xueqi could not hide his excitement. He stuttered and asked, "This holy lotus seed, where did you get it?" Fairy Xingyu, who had regained her senses, immediately emitted a silver light that soared into the sky. She recklessly shrouded the area within 1,000 feet of the holy lotus seed. She believed that if there were any changes at this time, even if Xiaohua wanted to touch the holy lotus seed, Fairy Xingyu would mercilessly deliver a fatal blow. "Suji!" Fairy Xingyu shouted. "Who cares where it came from? Take it quickly." "Senior." Xiaohua knew that Suji was a person of noble character. He definitely wouldn't eat food that was given to him for free. He bowed and said, "Senior, please be at ease. This pill was obtained by Junior from the Dragon Island's training space. Its origin is clean. This is also this Junior's sincere filial piety towards you." Good child, good child, good child. Suji said "good" a few times, and the silver brilliance around him, which was mostly grayish-black, also soared into the sky. A fishy smell immediately filled the entire starry sky. As Suji's body expanded to 3,000 meters in size, layers of scattered light fragments rolled down from his body like waves. Wherever these light fragments landed, all things withered, and even space turned gray and collapsed. When Suji's figure landed, Xiaohua saw that the silver light covering his head had emerged from the grayish-black color. Although the silver light was still shining, wisps of grayish-black color seeped into his head, as if they were poisoned. The rust spots that had previously covered the immortal mark were now connected, like a strange beast that wanted to devour the immortal mark. Suji opened his mouth, and a mouthful of immortal spiritual qi landed on the sacred lotus seed that had turned into flames. Woo! With a sound, half of the flames were extinguished. The runes in the flames suddenly rushed out from the immortal spiritual qi and entangled with the flames. Seeing this, Suji spat out another mouthful of immortal spiritual qi. Huff! This time, the flames were even weaker, and the runes emitted a silver light. Buzz! The space where the sacred lotus seed was located began to vibrate, and a light shadow shaped like a lotus seed emerged from the silver light. Suji didn't dare to be negligent. He formed a series of seals with his silver-gray hands, and several immortal techniques turned into thunderbolts and landed on the sacred lotus seed. Ayo, ayo, ayo. In the distorted space near the sacred lotus seed, the wails of gods and ghosts were suddenly heard. Wisps of pitch-black devil qi mixed with holy Buddhist light emerged from the space and frantically poured into the sacred lotus seed's flames. Sizzle! The flames were immediately extinguished, and it turned back into the stardust-like pill that Xiaohua had seen in the Dragon Domain's mezzanine. Huff! Suji opened his mouth, and a silver light fell. It was precisely the sacred lotus seed. When the sacred lotus seed entered Suji's mouth, an explosion sounded like a fire rune exploding. The extinguished flames reappeared on Xueqi's head, enveloping the rusty immortal mark and the grayish-black silver light on his head. Ao, ao, ao. In the flames, a devilish sound was heard, and devils bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they danced with the sound. Namo Amitabha Buddha, Namo Amitabha Buddha. Along with the devilish sound, there were Buddhist chants. Bursts of Sanskrit chants that sounded like the sounds of nature came from the void, following which, heavenly flowers fell from Xueqi's head, sprinkling into the grayish-black silver light. Wherever the heavenly flowers passed, the grayish-black color was washed away, and the fragrance of the heavenly flowers diluted the stench within the silver light. Excellent. Seeing this, Xueqi couldn't help but smile. Rumble, rumble. The flames burned, and the rumbling sounds were endless. The same went for the Buddhist chants, and the devilish chants were unyielding. Within the flames, countless lightning bolts danced and shot down like flying swords. Rather than saying that Xueqi was consuming the sacred lotus seed, it was better to say that it was a battle between Buddha and demon immortal. However, after the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the lights and shadows continued to flicker, and the rumbling sounds continued. However, the flames were still on Xueqi's head and did not spread down. On Xueqi's body, the grayish-black color was still deepening, and fragments of light continued to fall. Although Xueqi didn't understand, he could clearly see that Xueqi's body was becoming fainter and fainter. Damn it! Xueqi suddenly understood something and cursed inwardly. This is the 3 continents. Although it's in Star Moon Palace, without sufficient immortal qi, the sacred lotus seed can't be used to its full potential. Moreover, Xueqi has been injured for so many years. Without the support of immortal qi, the sacred lotus seed won't be able to heal his injuries. If Xueqi's injuries aren't good, the immortal's 3rd decay won't be able to stop it. Since Xueqi thought of it, Fairy Xingyu naturally thought of it as well. High in the sky, there was a clear clang. An extremely bright silver light flashed between Fairy Xingyu's eyebrows. This silver light was like a bright star, illuminating the entire starry sky. Woo! The silver light was like a star, flying out from between Fairy Xingyu's eyebrows and crashing down on Xueqi. As the silver star rushed out, Fairy Xingyu's silver body suddenly became much fainter. As the silver star fell, the space rumbled, and layers of spatial ripples rippled in the starry sky. Boom! A moment later, the silver star fell into the flames, making a loud noise. The intensity of the flames suddenly increased. In particular, the silver light swords and the flames shot out in all directions like a sword net, enveloping the space within a radius of 3,000 feet. Under the sword net, more than half of the grayish-black color was destroyed. Through the flames, Xueqi could already see that the grayish-black spots in the immortal mark had been burned and broken. However, these spots were still struggling tenaciously in the demonic qi and howling, as if they were going to fight back. Senior. Xueqi laughed heartily and put his palms together. I'm here to help you. As he spoke, golden light burst out from Xueqi's body, and his figure slowly grew. When he was more than 1,000 feet tall, Xueqi chanted again, Namo Maitreya Buddha, by my command I. As Xueqi used the 7th divine ability of the Buddhist sect's 9-syllable Sanskrit incantation, the Buddha's aura in the nearby void shone brightly. This Buddha's aura condensed into the shape of water waves, surging from all directions and pouring into the flames. Moreover, in the Buddhist light, Xueqi secretly ordered the demon Venerable Shi to separate a wisp of demonic sense, which turned into a devil and flew in. The 9 syllables mantra, Lai, was really a Buddhist purification. Xueqi used the Buddhist power of the world-honored Buddha, Maitreya, to purify it. The water-like Buddhist light had already destroyed most of the demonic qi in the rust spots. The devils that were attracted by the divine lotus seed were scared away by the demon Venerable Shi's demonic sense, and those who were slow to react were devoured by the demon Venerable Shi. Seeing the grayish-black spots shrinking rapidly, Xueqi looked up to the sky and roared. Roar? His roar shook the whole starry sky formation.
Boom.
Boom. Boom. Following 3 loud roars, 3 silver light beams shot up from Xueqi's immortal mark, piercing into the starry sky like light swords. Then, the space where the 3 light beams landed twisted and began to collapse rapidly. As the space collapsed, strands of silver light beams shot out from the space fragments, and a strong immortal spiritual qi gushed out from the fragments. Immortal? Immortal spiritual qi? Fairy Xingyu was stunned. She hurriedly released her extended thought and cried out in joy, Xueqi, this is the immortal realm crack from before. How did it move here? As Fairy Xingyu spoke, the space fragments collapsed completely. A silver light beam fell and shone on Xueqi. Buzz. The strong immortal spiritual qi poured into the light beam like the Milky Way, and an obvious vortex appeared above Xueqi's head. As the immortal spiritual qi poured in, the silver light shone brightly, and the wind blew violently. The immortal mark was as bright as the sun. Although Xiaohua could not see the spots in the silver light clearly, he could see the flames spreading rapidly below Xueqi's body. Wherever the flames went, the grayish-black spots were immediately burned away. The extremely thin silver light was also visible to the naked eye.
Xiaohua was relieved.
He withdrew his Buddhist divine sense, but did not withdraw his Dharma body. He stood by the side with a smile. Chapter 45-56. The Saint Lotus Seed was indeed the Saint Lotus Seed. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the flames had already reached the bottom of Xueqi's feet. As the flames passed, a transparent, sparkling, and radiant silver shell appeared in front of Xiaohua. The threatening aura of the shell was unobstructed as it tumbled in the air. The golden light around Xiaohua was unable to resist this aura and unconsciously retreated. He was already more than 100 miles away, and under the silver light, Xiaohua's figure was still moving further away. Boom! The flame fell under Xueqi's feet, turned into a lotus seed, and once again swirled towards Xueqi's head. In just a few breaths' time, the lotus seed flame had reached Xueqi's immortal mark. Swoosh! All the aura and brilliance of the flame converged into the immortal mark. Boom! Another ball of aura rushed out from the immortal mark and fell into the lotus seed flame. Boom! A stream of light appeared on Xueqi's immortal mark again. It was obviously different from before. The moment the stream of light disappeared, the light pillar that seemed to pierce through heaven and earth slowly shrank. The crack in the starry sky began to slowly close. Xueqi, seeing this, Fairy Xingyu hurriedly rushed toward the light pillar. She urged, "Quick, this is our last chance to return to the immortal realm." "Okay," Xueqi replied. He raised his hand and made a grabbing motion. Clang! The lotus flames floating above his head condensed together and turned into a silver lotus seed. Xueqi moved his body into the silver light pillar. He looked up at Xiaohua and said in a thunderous voice, "Xiaohua, my divination skills are not wrong after all. You are indeed my savior when I return to the immortal realm. To tell you the truth, when I did the divination back then, I did not believe the result. If not for the holy lotus seed, I would not have returned to the immortal realm. And the holy lotus seed could not exist in the lower realm. At that time, I even thought that you could only help Xingyue. But I really did not expect that not only did you lead us through the starry sky maze and help us open the starry sky gate, but you also brought us the 5 zodiac tokens and the holy lotus seed. This Saint Lotus seed not only saved my life, it also allowed me to step into the light immortal realm. Xiaohua, no words can express my gratitude for your great kindness. Whatever you say now is meaningless. Wait until you ascend to the immortal world, then we'll drink and chat merrily." On Xueqi's head, Fairy Xingyu was also very happy. She shouted, "Xueqi, congratulations on entering the light immortal realm." As she spoke, Fairy Xingyue looked at Xiaohua and said with a smile, Xiaohua, thank you. When you fly to the celestial world, I will also pour wine for you and Suji. At this point, Fairy Xingyu actually transmitted her voice again. Oh, by the way, there seems to be some things in the Moon Embracing Palace that are useful for your return to the Dawn Rain continent. Of course, whether or not you can find it is not something I can know. What's the point of pouring wine? Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, You need to get drunk. Fairy Xingyu covered her mouth and laughed quietly. Seeing that the two of them had flown to the edge of the crack, Suji raised his hand, and the lotus seed condensed from flames turned into a stream of light and landed in front of Xiaohua. Suji transmitted his voice, Xiaohua, this is transformed from my immortal mark. It contains my cultivation experience and imprint of my immortal mark. This is originally an item from the immortal world. I'll lend it to you temporarily to comprehend. It will be of great help to you when you ascend to the immortal world in the future. Remember, after you ascend to the immortal world, you must return it to me. Haha. Xiaohua saw that Suji rarely showed favoritism outside the law and even spoke vaguely. He stretched out his hand to receive the lotus seed and said, Junior, thanks Senior for your generous gift. I wish Senior's love is stronger than gold. I wish you 100 years of blissful marriage and a son soon. Boom. Following Xiaohua's congratulatory words, Suji's immortal body shook twice and fled into the crack of the immortal world in a panic. The crack of the immortal world closed with a loud bang. The entire starry sky shook a few times and then returned to normal. Holy Lotus Seed, Holy Lotus Seed. Xiaohua was really excited. The sense of accomplishment from helping someone, especially an immortal, was much stronger than what he obtained himself. Moreover, to be able to help someone who had helped him so much, not only for karma, but also for the beauty of the world, Xiaohua felt that it was worth it. He tossed the lotus seed up and down and laughed inwardly. I really didn't expect that the ancient golden core in the void of the dragon domain would have such an effect. This karma was already formed on the Dragon Island. Then he looked at the lotus seed again. Where his gaze fell, endless lightning flashed and countless clouds lingered inside. It looked indescribably mysterious. However, Xiaohua laughed again. I've already obtained the innate purple qi. There are countless mysteries of heaven and earth in it. Why would I need this item condensed from the immortal mark? However, if I don't accept it, how can Suji be at ease? Moreover, Suji's experience in this lotus seed is even more important. In the future, when I encounter a bottleneck, I will inevitably need it. Fine. This item will be my Fortune Gate's cornerstone treasure. With that, Xiaohua sent the lotus seed into the Shenhua continent. Strangely enough, wherever the lotus seed landed, the immortal slaying stage fragment would release lightning, attracting the lotus seed to the side. Wherever the lightning struck, the lotus seed would release boundless clouds that shrouded the immortal slaying stage. Following that, strands of clouds slowly descended from the sky above the Shenhua continent, shrouding the entire Shenhua continent. Each strand of cloud contained the aura of immortal marks. Any Fortune Gate disciple on the Shenhua continent who was fated to obtain these strands of cloud would open a door to the heavens. In the future, these disciples' futures would be immeasurable. After putting away the lotus seed, Xiaohua stretched lazily and muttered to himself, Since entering the Star Moon Palace, I can be considered to have experienced life and death. Now he could finally take a break. My trip to the Star Moon Palace is over. Thinking about it, this Xiao has also obtained quite a lot. Not to mention the clear feather pill that Senior Su gave to this Xiao. Even the other 11 strange things are all useful. This Xiao will find a place to eat this clear feather pill first. His granny, even the Grand Mist ancestor, came to the Star Moon Palace. I feel uneasy. If it weren't for Senior Su, I definitely wouldn't have let that guy in so easily. He dared to scheme against my Fortune Gate. How could I let him off so easily? Thinking of the place where he had taken the clear feather pill, Xiaohua naturally thought of the starry sky. He raised his eyes and looked at the starry sky. The 12 star arrays where the 12 zodiac tokens had landed had already disappeared. Now, the entire starry sky was empty, and there were no stars flashing. Xiao Hua did not even think about it. He urged his body to descend. However, Xiao Hua was stunned on the spot after descending for 1,000 zhong. He stopped and raised his head to look at the sky. He rubbed his chin and thought to himself, the 12 zodiac tokens broke the 12 star arrays, and 12 jade boxes flew out from the star arrays. If the star arrays are completely broken, the starry sky will return to its original state, right? Not to mention, after the last jade box flew out, there was a mysterious aura in the space. Although that aura disappeared in a flash, it felt familiar to me. However, at that time, I was only focused on checking if there was a holy lotus seed inside the jade box. Moreover, the entire space was torn apart by the immortal world's crack, and that aura disappeared. Could it be that there is something strange in this space? Could it be that these 12 star arrays are just a cover? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua's eyes shone brightly. He rushed into the space and released his divine sense to explore inch by inch. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua didn't find anything even after looking for half an hour. Because the space was like the vault of heaven, unreachable and boundless, Xiao Hua's divine sense couldn't reach it. The 12 star arrays were empty, no different from the void. Could it be that I was wrong? Xiao Hua frowned, or my feeling just now was wrong. A moment later, Xiao Hua opened his delusion breaker Dharma eye and scanned his surroundings. At this time, Xiao Hua's eyes were blurred. Bursts of stinging pain were transmitted to his mind from his eyes and into the mysterious dark clouds. Xiao Hua couldn't bear it. However, in his blurry eyes, except for the place where the golden light flashed and some fine timelines, the other places were completely the outline of a palace. There was nothing special. Seeing this, Xiao Hua didn't hesitate to teleport straight to the golden light. Unfortunately, this space was really strange. Teleportation seemed to be inferior to flying. After half an hour, Xiao Hua arrived at the place where the golden light flashed. Xiao Hua looked at his position and then looked around. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. The place where the golden light came from was a space covered by fine timelines. At this time, it was no different from the surrounding space. Xiao Hua also tried Yuan Shen, soul consciousness, Buddhist consciousness, divine sense, and even the clear eye technique, but he couldn't see anything strange. Moreover, this space was only a few dozen miles in size. It was almost a drop in the ocean in the entire seemingly boundless space. He didn't know if Fairy Xingyu had the Dharma eye technique, but he believed that, other than Fairy Xingyu, among all the humans and demons who could enter the Star Moon Palace, he was probably the only one who could find the place where the golden light came from. Here, Xiao Hua opened his Dharma eye again. Through the fine timelines, the other space that overlapped with this space was also vaguely revealed. The interior of the space was pitch black, and nothing could be seen clearly. However, there seemed to be a huge object covering the entire space. Damn it, what is it? Xiao Hua closed his Dharma eye and rolled his eyes. What kind of aura makes me feel a sense of familiarity? Now that the 12 zodiac tokens are gone, how can this aura leak out? This is the law of time. It's not something I can break. Chapter 45-57. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua showed a trace of hesitation. After a while, he narrowed his eyes and thought to himself, looks like I can only try this divine ability. I just don't know if this divine ability is effective against the law of time. After waiting for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, Xiao Hua once again opened his delusion breaker Dharma eye. Silver light flashed within the Dharma eye, and a beam of silver light shot out from the Dharma eye and fell into the void. Open! Xiao Hua roared angrily. The void started to spin under the light beam, forming a whirlpool several feet in size. Then, spatial cracks appeared in the whirlpool. Unfortunately, outside the spatial cracks, inexplicable starlight appeared. Neither the golden light nor the aura appeared. Xiao Hua's plan to use the law of space to break the law of time was going to fail. Break. Xiao Hua roared again. His entire law eye, which seemed to be staking everything on a single throw, emitted an intense dark green brilliance. That silver beam of light also doubled in size in an instant, emitting a trembling sound. The void vortex below the beam of light suddenly deepened, and then a faint golden light flashed out with a schwap sound, followed by a wisp of aura rushing out from the vortex. However, the golden light and aura both flashed and disappeared. When the golden light appeared, the delusion breaker Dharma Eye was in severe pain. Xiao Hua could no longer hold on and hurriedly closed his Dharma Eye. A layer of black luster rapidly appeared between his eyebrows. Ah! Xiao Hua cried out involuntarily. The surprise in his voice far exceeded the pain of the Dharma Eye. Isn't this the aura of the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper? As he spoke, Xiao Hua raised his hand and took out the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper from the space where Taoist Master Yin was. Sure enough, when the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper appeared, the aura rushed toward the void. Layers of space collapsed, but nothing else appeared after the space collapsed. I understand now. Surprised, Xiao Hua restrained his emotions and pondered. The law of time must be the fragment of the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper. So, I can feel the familiar aura from a different space. But the fragment is in another space. How can I break through the shackles of time? Speaking of Xiao Hua's ability to break through the shackles of time, it was naturally the lightning evasion. Previously, Xiao Hua had already tried pushing his lightning evasion to its limits in the Beast Enclosure and Mount Fubo. However, he was still a hair's breadth away from breaking through the timelines, and this hair's breadth should be an intrinsic difference. How could Xiao Hua possibly break through it? Perhaps it wouldn't have worked before. A complacent smile appeared on Xiao Hua's face. With a wave of his hand, a jade box appeared in his hand. This Zhao's magic power doesn't seem to be enough to support the lightning escape to surpass the fine lines of time. However, this Xiao now has the clear feather pill. Senior Su had made it clear that consuming this item required one's cultivation realm and a firm Dao heart. When I was fighting with Bei Xian, I had already fused all of my previous accumulations. Now that I lack time, this clear feather pill is naturally the best choice. And now, this Xiao wants to rely on magic power to activate the lightning escape technique to compete with the laws of time. Isn't this the same as using the medicinal effects of the clear feather pill? Wouldn't he be able to use the law of time to eliminate the hidden dangers of the clear feather pill? Haha, this Xiao is a genius. This is a way to kill two birds with one stone. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua took out the clear feather pill from the jade box and placed it in his mouth. He held the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper in his right hand and activated his magic power. Suddenly, lightning appeared on the surface of his body. Xiao Hua's figure moved, charging straight into the void in front of him. Lightning flashed around Xiao Hua's body, illuminating the surrounding space. At the same time this lightning flashed, space-time resistance immediately appeared. It was as if a surging wave was surging from all directions, annihilating Xiao Hua's entire body. There was no difference from before. Soon, Xiao Hua's body began to slowly move. For layers of shadows appeared. Immediately after, Xiao Hua's body turned into 1,000 feet of lightning. Moreover, the lightning became illusory, twisted, and broke into dozens of pieces. At the same time, the rumbling sound of thunder was also elongated, gradually penetrating deep into the void. The lightning suddenly trembled. Within the lightning, Xiao Hua's body turned into 132 million illusory dots. These dots of light rapidly flew back and forth and gradually merged into the void. When only 30% of the illusory dots remained, Xiao Hua felt that his body was empty. All of the illusory dots began to tremble violently. Xiao Hua didn't hesitate to flip his tongue. The clear feather pill turned into spiritual liquid and fell into his body. Boom! The clear feather pill that fell into Xiaohua's body was different from ordinary pills. Waves of incomparably powerful medicinal effects were born from the medicinal liquid. Like a surging tide, they rushed into every part of Xiaohua's body. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly urged his cultivation method to refine the medicinal effects. The clear feather pill was really overbearing. Not only did the refined true essence contain immortal spiritual energy, but it also contained the mysteries of heaven and earth. This true essence entered Xiaohua's meridians and pushed Xiaohua's cultivation to the late stage of the Mahayana realm. On the other hand, it entered the scattered nascent soul, causing the scattered nascent soul to rapidly expand. Bursts of tiny purple lightning appeared in the void and tore the already extremely distorted void into pieces. Moreover, a powerful pressure was emitted from these lightning threads and spread in all directions. As Xiaohua's cultivation increased, this pressure also rose steadily. Looking at the 30% of illusories that hadn't merged into the void, they shook and formed shadows. The shadows were very slow, but they were very stable. When the shadows formed 9 layers, the sound of wind whistling began to emerge from the shadows. The remaining illusory dots also began to gradually merge into the void. After a while, Xiaohua suddenly felt that the void around him began to change. The more he urged the lightning escape technique, the slower his flying speed became. Everything around him also began to slow down. Xiaohua felt happy in his heart. He understood that he was already close to breaking through the shackles of time. Therefore, he accelerated the refining of the clear feather pill's medicinal effects. At this time, Xiaohua's starry sky nascent soul once again turned into a nebula. Strands of tiny lightning threads mixed with immortal spiritual energy flashed between these nebulas. The grand mist purple chi also had tiny cloud threads that slowly merged into the nebula. Unfortunately, Xiaohua was just a cultivator of the mortal realm. He hadn't even fully grasped the laws of space, so how could he break through the shackles of time? In the end, seeing that the clear feather pill's medicinal effects had been refined, Xiaohua still had half of the illusories that hadn't completely merged into the void. On that day, the void around Xiaohua also didn't completely stop. Damn it! Xiaohua felt the illusory dots shake again. His body was about to break free from the void. He couldn't help but curse. He knew that he was going to fail again today. At this time, the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper in Xiaohua's right hand suddenly trembled. It emitted an intense golden light. Where the golden light landed, the void began to turn transparent. In front of Xiaohua's eyes, the originally impossible to see timelines suddenly appeared. These timelines contained endless profound meanings. Previously, when Xiaohua was comprehending the fragments of time in the heavenly prison, he couldn't see these profound meanings. When the timelines appeared, Xiaohua's surroundings became deathly silent. It was as if everything in the world had stopped. Even Xiaohua himself seemed to be unable to move. In the instant that the world fell silent, the golden light of the 10,000 extinguishing celestial dipper rushed into the fine lines of time and landed in another space. At the place where the golden light disappeared, a fragment and a crystal that looked like a cloud flew through the fine lines of time and landed in the gap of the 10,000 extinguishing celestial dipper. The moment the fragment fell into the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper, the golden light disappeared. The timelines instantly disappeared. At the same time, the still world moved again. The space that was moving slowly in Xiaohua's eyes appeared again. However, this slowness only lasted for a few breaths of time. The entire space shook rapidly. Then, Xiaohua's half of the illusory dots that had yet to merge into the void also trembled. All the small dots that had disappeared before appeared again. Xiaohua's entire body flashed like a wave of water, completely revealing himself in the air once again. Just like before, bean-sized beads of sweat suddenly appeared on Xiaohua's forehead. However, Xiaohua didn't have the time to wipe the sweat away. With a sweep of his mind, He immediately stored the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper and the cloud-like crystal into his space. Then, he let out a long breath. He sat down cross-legged, his palms facing the sky, and began to meditate. Along with the activation of his cultivation method, thin threads of lightning appeared around Xueqi's body. These threads of lightning transformed into millions of vortexes. At the same time, Xueqi's starry sky's scattered nascent soul also flew out from his lower dantian. His entire body was surrounded by primordial purple qi. The brilliance of the stars and the moon that filled the sky was like a waterfall. It rushed out of nowhere and crazily landed on the scattered nascent soul and his body. As Xueqi's pressure slowly spread out, it made up for the deficiencies caused by the activation of the clear feather pill's medicinal power. The starry sky's scattered nascent soul also gradually expanded. In the end, it was as if it was going to cover the entire starry sky. After an unknown amount of time, the surrounding void began to give birth to a faint will of heaven and earth. This will quickly filled the entire space and fell on Xueqi's body, like the water of the four seas. Xueqi's figure moved slightly, and the starlight that filled the sky disappeared. It seemed that the incomparably huge starry sky's scattered nascent soul also quickly shrank and fell on top of Xueqi's head. When Xueqi opened his eyes, he saw a river of stars flashing between his eyes. At the same time, lightning also appeared. Xueqi looked up with some surprise, as if he didn't understand the origin of this will of heaven and earth. Then he closed his eyes again and checked his cultivation base. After a while, he opened his eyes and thought to himself, Senior Su's words are indeed true. This clear feather pill is worthy of being a medicinal pill of the immortal world. My cultivation base has already reached the late Mahayana realm, and my starry sky nascent soul has also reached the end of the 9th tribulation. Moreover, this clear feather pill's residual medicinal power has not been completely refined. After refining it, this Xiao can cross the tribulation at any time. The clear feather pill is so powerful, presumably other things also have similar effects. Thinking about this, Xueqi took out a few more jade boxes and carefully examined them. Inside these jade boxes, there were 3 colored clouds, 9 colored hills, flashing crystal dragons, strange colored bone flowers, and even a multicolored butterfly. Xueqi looked at them with a smile. His mind entered the space and called out Taoist Witch, Celestial Being, Demon Sovereign Sure, and the others. Without waiting for Xueqi to speak, Taoist Witch and the others cupped their hands and smiled. Congratulations, fellow Taoist, for reaching the peak of the 9th grade of Essence Force. Chapter 45-58. Xueqi shook his head with a smile and said, What is there to be happy about? If not for the fragment of the myriad extinguishing heavenly dipper, I would not have taken the clear feather pill now. Taoist Wu nodded and said, You are right. Fellow Taoist, you are now at the late stage of Mahayana realm, and still have the medicinal strength of the clear feather pill in your body. Perhaps you will ascend to the immortal realm after leaving Star Moon Palace. But we have yet to return to Dawn Rain Continent, and there are still many things we need to do.
How can we leave now?
Reverend Yin looked at Xueqi and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist, you are overthinking. Do you think ascending to the immortal realm is an easy thing? Among 10,000 cultivators who have cultivated to the peak of the 9th tier of Yuan energy, it is impossible for one to ascend to the immortal realm. Furthermore, the closer one is to the end, the more difficult it is to cultivate. Although fellow Taoist has already reached the late stage of tribulation transcendence, it will take at least 1,000 years for you to reach the consummation stage. Sherfiend quickly said, That's right. That's right. Big brother, it's the same as when you use the lightning escape technique. The first 70% of your physical body can merge with the void, but the later 30% is much slower. If you want to merge the last 5% into the void, who knows how long you'll have to wait. Xueqi looked at his clones and said with a smile, Let's not talk about it anymore. In any case, I have made great progress in my overall strength, so we should not neglect it anymore. Then, he pointed at the jade box hovering in the air and said with a smile, "This is a treasure I obtained together with a clear feather pill. If nothing goes wrong, it should be able to help you in your cultivation. Fellow Taoists, please take a look at it, as it is what you need." Reverend Yun gave it a look, then grabbed it with his dragon claw. It was the glittering crystal dragon, and he said, "You don't have to look at it anymore. It must be I." The Celestial frowned and looked at this and that. Finally, he grabbed the small 9-colored mountain with his big hand. He squinted his eyes and looked at it for a moment, then nodded and said, "This is it. Although I don't know what it is, the aura in it is very familiar. I think after refining it, my overall strength will catch up with fellow Taoist." Taoist, which smiled faintly. Without any hesitation, he extended his arm and took the strange-colored bone flower in his hand. Like Reverend Yun, there's no need for me to look at it any longer. This thing is definitely mine. It's just that I don't know how helpful it will be to I's cultivation after refining it. Big brother. Demon Venerable sure was a little envious. He looked at the jade boxes on the left and said with a flattering face, "This 3-colored cloud has the aura of noble spirit. It must belong to Chu. That starfish has the aura of the power of the moon and stars. It should belong to Fengwu. As for the bamboo that condenses the long river and the colorful butterfly, I don't know who would use them. However, little brother knows that all of this is useless for little brother's cultivation. I wonder if big brother has anything that I need? What else do you want?" The Celestial put away the 9-colored mountain and shouted, "You should refine that demonic array's demonic spirit properly. It's stronger than anything else." "Yes, yes." Demon Venerable sure smiled and said, "Little brother knows that I'm being greedy. However, since all of you have gained something, you should let little brother be happy, right?" Haha. Xiaohua laughed. He waved his hand and took out another jade box. "Don't worry. This palace's star array is very magical. There are all kinds of treasures from Buddhism, Taoist, Confucian, and demon. How can there be no demonic array? This is for you." Demon Lord Sure received the jade box and opened it to take a look. Inside, there was a blood-red skull that looked like a crystal-clear crystal. Demon Lord Sure Bujua laughed and quickly kept the jade box. He bowed and said, "Thank you, big brother. Little brother will devour this thing. I think I can take the last step." "Damn it." The Celestial rolled his eyes and said, "Why do you want to take the last step? Could it be that you want to ascend to the immortal realm too?" Hehe. Demon Venerable sure laughed and said, "Big brother, you don't know. Little brother can also ascend. However, little brother is going to the upper realm Devil Swamp in the Devil Realm. Good boy, you can also ascend." The Celestial was envious and said, "If all of you ascend, where will I go?" "Don't worry, fellow Taoist." Taoist which smiled and said, "When we take the last step, we will naturally know. Moreover, at the very least, we still have Shunhua continent." When the Celestial heard that, he raised his hand and took out the 9-colored mountain and said, "Fellow Taoist, you are right. Then I want to see where I will take the last step." With that, the Celestial opened his mouth and was about to swallow the 9-colored mountain. When Xiaohua saw that, he hurriedly raised his hand and blocked the mountain. He smiled bitterly and said, "Fellow Taoist, don't worry. This is not a good place to refine treasures. If not for the fragment of the great extinguishing heavenly dipper, I wouldn't have taken the clear feather pill here. It's not too late to refine it after we leave the Star Moon Palace and find a place to cultivate." "That works too." When the Celestial heard that, he kept the 9-colored mountain and said, "That's right, the cloud-like crystal chip with the fragment of the great extinguishing heavenly dipper seems to be the secret technique to refine the great extinguishing heavenly dipper. I want to study it." "Very good." Xiaohua smiled and handed the crystal chip to the Celestial. "I'll leave it to you to study it." When the Celestial kept the crystal chip, Xiaohua said, "Fellow Taoists, you don't have to go back first. When I was passing through the platform earlier, I heard strange thunder. There seemed to be some strange words in the thunder. The sound contained the power of laws, and ordinary cultivators couldn't withstand it. However, when I heard it, it also sounded in my heart. I seemed to be able to understand it. Now that we have nothing to do, instead of waiting for the Star Moon Palace to close, why don't we listen to it and see what mysteries there are inside? Very good. The Celestial smiled and said, as the saying goes, unity of will is an impregnable fortress. We will also help you to study it. Unity of will is an impregnable fortress? Daoist sorcerer smiled and asked, this phrase doesn't seem to be appropriate here. Haha, who cares if it's appropriate or not? I'll go listen to it first. Xueqi laughed. His figure flashed and landed at the place where he came from earlier. The Celestial and the others followed behind him. After exiting the palace door condensed from silver light, they saw the greenish-white platform again. It was also as dark and cold as usual, as if everything that happened in the pavilion had nothing to do with the outside world. Even if a crack was torn in the immortal world, and the two exiled immortals had returned to the immortal world, they couldn't raise a trace of light in this darkness. Xueqi and the others stood in front of the pavilion and looked around. There were also some light silhouettes in the shadows in the distance, but they couldn't see what they looked like clearly. A kind of heaviness and mystery came from afar. Xueqi and the others passed by the light silhouettes and flew towards the platform. They knew clearly that the light silhouettes weren't something they could approach casually. After flying to the platform, Xueqi and the others landed and waited quietly. Sure enough, in the time it took to brew a cup of tea, thunder rumbled from high up in the sky. Xueqi hurriedly looked at the Celestial, Daoist sorcerer, and the others. It wasn't out of Xueqi's expectations. Their bodies shone with golden, blood-red, or gray-white light. However, their bodies were the same as Xueqi's, showing no signs of exploding. Xueqi breathed a sigh of relief and listened with rapt attention. That voice appeared in Xueqi's heart again. However, this time was different from the previous times. The voice was abnormally blurry, and he couldn't hear what it was saying at all. Fellow Daoist. Just as Xueqi frowned, the Celestial's body trembled, and he cried out in alarm. This seems to be a cultivation method. It's really suitable for this poor Daoist to cultivate. Xueqi's body also shook. He looked at the Celestial in disbelief and listened with rapt attention again. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't hear it clearly. He looked at the Celestial again and frowned as well. He couldn't help but walk toward the other direction of the platform. Fellow Daoist. Xueqi reminded him, that place is not somewhere you and I can go. Without waiting for Xueqi to finish speaking, the Celestial raised his hand, indicating for Xueqi to shut up. His figure stopped, turned around, and took a few steps forward. In the end, he stopped again and said to Xueqi, fellow Daoist, this poor Daoist can confirm that this voice is talking about a kind of cultivation method that this poor Daoist can cultivate. But I can't hear it clearly from here. You can only hear it when you go there. As he said that, the Celestial pointed at the outline of a light shadow outside the platform. How is that possible? Xueqi was puzzled. The thunder can only be heard on the platform, but it can't be heard after the platform. How can that light shadow be heard? Why don't we go there and have a look? Reverend Yun said with a smile, if fellow Daoist feels unsafe, we won't leave the platform. All right. Xueqi nodded helplessly. He understood the Celestial's feelings very well. After all, it was rare for him to come across a cultivation method he could cultivate. If it were him, he wouldn't want to give it up so easily. What he was worried about was that the Celestial might not be able to hear it clearly when they reached the edge of the platform. Sure enough, when they landed on the edge of the platform, not only did the thunder not become louder, it became softer and finally disappeared. Damn it! Celestial Bujue roared to the sky. Are you kidding me? As soon as the Celestial's voice died away, another thunder rumbled. However, this time, it was not the thunder that fell, but the same inexplicable sound. The voice rang in Xueqi's mind. Xiaohua shuddered and stood there in a daze. Although the voice was vague, he could hear it clearly. The discussion about the cultivation method is about to begin. All divine sons are in position. The discussion about the cultivation method?
Divine.
Divine sons? Xiaohua came to his senses and hurriedly turned to look at the celestial, Taoist sorcerer, and Reverend Yun. Obviously, they had heard it too, and their faces were filled with disbelief. After all, the Xingyue palace mentioned by Fairy Xingyu was an ancient divine object. How could there be an ancient deity in it? But if these voices were just illusions and were just one of the restrictive spells in the Xingyue palace, what was the use of these voices? Chapter 45-59. The Inheritance. Xiaohua suddenly realized something. Reverend Yun raised his hand and pointed into the distance, saying, "Fellow Taoist, look. The silhouette over there is emitting a golden light." Xiaohua hurriedly looked over. Indeed, within the pitch-black silhouette, strange silhouettes were lit up one after another, like lamps in the night. "The sons of gods are sitting there," the celestial muttered. "Could that be where Xianhong is discussing the law? Let's go and have a look." Thinking of the inheritance, Xiaohua's heart stirred. He flew up and waved his hand. After flying over the platform, in the time it took to finish a meal, some large silhouettes appeared in front of them. They were similar to the pavilions from before, but most of the silhouettes were shining with a golden light. Only a few of them were dim. All the silhouettes that were shining with a golden light emitted a powerful and unpredictable aura. Xiaohua and the others could not get close at all. Xiaohua could only choose a dim silhouette to land on. However, the silhouette was like a pavilion without any door. Xiaohua reached out and touched the silhouette, but he felt a hard sensation. He could not enter at all. In the middle of the pavilion silhouette, there was a small protrusion. When Xiaohua touched the silhouette, the protrusion flashed with a golden light, and a strange lock was revealed. When Xiaohua's hand left the silhouette, the lock disappeared again.
Lock? Key?
When Xiaohua saw the lock, he immediately thought of the key he had obtained in the starry sky. He hurriedly took out the key and raised his hand to insert it into the lock. However, the lock flashed with a golden light, and the key bounced off. This key is actually not the key? Xiaohua was a little disappointed. Then, he took out the key he had obtained in the Yeqiong Heavenly Palace. Unfortunately, the key still could not be inserted into the lock. That's not right. Xiaohua was depressed. He thought to himself, I obtained 2 keys in the Xingyue Palace. How can it not be the key? Could it be that these 2 keys belong to other pavilions? Thinking of this, Xiaohua did not dare to be negligent. He looked up and saw that there was another silhouette not far away from the pavilion silhouette. He hurriedly flew over. This silhouette was even weirder. It looked like 2 inverted triangles joined together. Xiaohua touched the outline again, and the place where the 2 triangles touched flashed with a faint golden light. Another strange lock was revealed. Xiaohua hurriedly passed the 2 keys over. The light golden lock flashed with a golden light, and the 2 keys bounced open. Just as Xiaohua was about to head to another pavilion, fellow Taoist Kuang reminded him, "Fellow Taoist, don't forget that you still have a key that fell into the spatial crevice from the dragon field." Xiaohua casually replied, "That's the key to the dragon domain. It can't be used here, right?" However, after he finished speaking, Xiaohua also smiled. Since the holy lotus seed could be obtained from the spatial crack, then perhaps the key obtained from the spatial crack could also be used here? Unfortunately, the key with the dragon pattern still bounced off the golden light and did not open the lock. Xiaohua waved his hand again and took out the key he obtained from the Heaven and Earth Pagoda. He waved his hand and sent it into the lock. He smiled and said, "I have many keys. Why don't I try them one by one?" Without waiting for Xiaohua to finish speaking with its swish, a light sound rang out. The lock shone brightly, and the key engraved with dragon patterns actually fell into the lock. Along with the light, the 2 triangular outlines lit up. At the same time that the lock entered the outline, layer upon layer of dragon patterns appeared in front of Xiaohua's eyes. Xiaohua reached out his hand and pushed. The originally solid outline had already disappeared, and his hand sank into it. This is really strange. Xiaohua was overjoyed, but also extremely puzzled. This key came from the Heaven and Earth Pagoda. It should belong to the supreme dragon god of the great desolate continent. How can his key open this pavilion of the Star Moon Palace? Could it be that supreme dragon god is the ancient almighty who refined this Star Moon Palace? However, Xiaohua could not think too much at this moment. Under the urging of celestial being, Xiaohua stepped forward and flew into the two triangular pavilions. Inside the pavilions was the ocean. The blue seawater looked like crystal, and layers of strong aura of the great desolate continent flowed like the wind in this seemingly endless ocean. As soon as Xiaohua, celestial being, Taoist witch, and the others entered the pavilions, the sound of thunder rang out again. As the sound of thunder fell, the entire ocean shook. Streams of indescribable principles emerged from the shaking and rushed into Xiaohua's body, stimulating the crystal-like divine spark and primal purple energy. The invisible golden light of the divine spark shot out from Xiaohua's body, connecting celestial being, Taoist witch, Reverend Yin, and Lord Archfiend. The principles vibrated the golden light and turned into profound meanings that fell into everyone's bodies. Just like Xiaohua, they could clearly hear the voice in their hearts. This time, Xiaohong will discuss the Tao of gods. Gods are almighty beings. Anything can become a god, no matter if it is a demon, a devil, a spirit, a human, a dragon, a sorcerer, or this. Xiaohua heard it clearly. Although he was greatly shocked, he also felt a little depressed. Damn it, I'm just a cultivator from the mortal realm. I haven't ascended to become an immortal yet. Why should I listen to the Tao of gods? If Senior Su hasn't returned to the immortal realm, I'll bring him here to listen to it. However, right at this moment, the voice continued, ordinary gods can only be regarded as demigods or even nihility gods. Even if they ascend to the divine realm of the great desolate continent and continue their cultivation, they can never become original gods, let alone incipient gods. This is what people in the three realms often say. Gods are not achieved through cultivation. This is because, in order to become an original god, one must obtain the words of a god, the chi of a god, the spirit of a god, and the body of a god before ascending to the divine realm of the great desolate continent. In the three realms, the cultivation of all living things is inclined towards one kind. It could be the words of a god, the chi of a god, the spirit of a god, or the body of a god. Even if there is a cultivator who can obtain two, if he obtains all four, there is not even one in a billion. Boom. When these words fell into Xiaohua's heart, it was like a sudden clap of thunder, like a sudden enlightenment. In an instant, Xiaohua's mind became clear. Without even thinking, he immediately sat down cross-legged and turned his 5 hearts towards the sky to listen quietly. The Tao of gods, even if he didn't understand it, he still had to listen. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The ancient great sorcerers cultivated the green seal script and obtained the words of a god. The ancient great scholars cultivated the inscription script and obtained the chi of a god. The ancient Buddha cultivated the golden seal script and obtained the spirit of a god. If a cultivator has these three, he can ascend to the divine realm of the great desolate continent. As for the body of a god, it is the primal chaos body after all. It is rare even in the divine realm of the great desolate continent. If a son of God wants to become an incipient god, he has to refine his body with the chaotic energy before he ascends to the divine realm of the great desolate continent. Even a demigod in the divine realm of the great desolate continent can hardly survive after falling into the chaos, let alone a cultivator from the lower realm. Therefore, in the divine realm of the great desolate continent, it is easy to cultivate the original god realm, but difficult to cultivate the incipient god realm. At first, Xiaohua's heart was still pounding, and he was even wild with joy. But later on, he became intoxicated. These words were not only the truth of the heaven and earth, but also something that Xiaohua would never be able to hear. Moreover, when these words fell into Xiaohua's heart, the heavenly Dao Xiaohua and the karma Xiaohua in the space were intoxicated. Countless profound meanings slowly flowed into Xiaohua's heart. As the words fell into his heart, the truth that was not easy to comprehend also turned into murmuring water. It was the same for Xiaohua, the celestial, Taoist sorcerer, Reverend Yun, and Shi the Exalted. Indescribable ripples were emanating from the bodies of the four clones, and dazzling lights were flashing from time to time. When they were intoxicated, the bodies of the four clones trembled at the same time. The celestial took out the small nine-colored mountain and slapped it on the top of his head. Immediately, the nine-colored light began to overflow from his head, slowly spreading down his body along with the words. Taoist sorcerer also took out the strange-colored bone flower, opened his mouth, and swallowed it. After that, his body began to tremble as well. Gradually, the trembling turned into a rhythm as he refined the bone flower. Reverend Yun and Shi the Exalted had also taken out the crystal dragon and the translucent blood-red skull respectively. Taking advantage of the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, they began to refine and devour them. After an unknown amount of time, although the discussion was neither fast nor slow, Xiaohua could already tell that it was not a single existence that was discussing the law, but rather multiple existences. Some of the contents of the discussion were like sweet rain to Xiaohua, indescribably wonderful, while some were incomprehensible. However, Xiaohua was not dispirited. He only memorized what he heard, regardless of whether he would forget it in the future. Moreover, he also clearly knew that the heavenly Dao Xiaohua and karma Xiaohua had long since escaped from his space, turning into an ethereal place to carefully comprehend. The mysteries of these two doppelgangers were something that even Xiaohua himself did not know, so he also believed that the things he did not understand, these two doppelgangers would certainly understand. When another voice rang out, Xiaohua's spirit was shaken, and he once again focused his mind, for the words were exactly the secret that he could not find even after all the hardships he had gone through. The world began with the soul, followed by the 5 elements, and then came the strength. Therefore, the mystery of the soul is comparable to the heaven and earth. The strength of the soul is far stronger than the strength of the 5 elements, and is even stronger than the strength of the fleshly body. Every creature has a spirit, and their fleshly body is different. Be it a beast, a man, a wood, or a spirit, they all have different bodies, different cultivation methods, and different paths to becoming a god. But the soul of every creature is one. The essence is the same, but the form is different. Or you can say that the grades are different. The cultivation of the soul is the engraving of the Dharma, which is the power of the heaven and earth. Only the cultivation of the soul can make all creatures equal. And only those who can control the strength of the soul can be called original God, and only then can they be qualified to step into the incipient God realm. Therefore, the cultivation of the soul touches the mystery of the heaven and earth, and harms the foundation of all creatures. Although one is an almighty expert, it is also a great taboo. I have traveled all over the immemorial world, read countless ancient secret histories, and found the mystery of the soul cultivation fragments. I have shared it with the sons of God, so they can comprehend it and see the heaven and earth. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.